Well, good morning, everybody. This is Bob Bylone. I'm the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center. Many of you on the call are familiar with our organization, the Recycling Market Center, but we have been in operation in Pennsylvania since 2005, and we're really an economic development and markets development engine, if you will, for the recycled materials that we collect and bring to market as manufacturing feedstocks here in Pennsylvania. So with that, we engage in industry outreach, and having markets development summits is no exception in those activities. And emerging from our COVID years here and our pandemic years, we're taking advantage of a virtual medium today again, and leading off with an organics management markets development summit. We're very pleased to have the Olin organization as our sponsor for today's webinar. Likewise, really pleased to have both EPA and DEP participating today. And before we lead off with our keynote speaker from EPA Region 3, we're going to have a word or two from our sponsor, and also a word or two from Wayne Bowen, our team lead here at the Recycling Market Center in Organics Management, to say a quick few words about housekeeping of the webinar for the day. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca Popowski from the Olin studio for a few remarks of programs and projects they have underway, but also, for those of you that don't know Olin, a brief introduction. So Rebecca, please take the floor.
Thank you, Bob. I'm going to try to share. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Rebecca Popowski. I'm a landscape architect at Olin, a landscape architecture and urban design firm in Philadelphia, and I'm the head of our research group. And I appreciate the opportunity to share just for a few minutes today a project that we've been working on very closely with the Recycling Market Center, and something that we're really excited to hear from you all about throughout the day. So this is a project that has been ongoing. The research has been ongoing for a few years, and we're currently in the process, or in the second year of an EPA SBIR small business award that we've been working on with the RMC on a project about looking at recycled color mixed glass in engineered topsoils for green stormwater infrastructure. And so, of course, we're interested in the conversations today and also in this research project to address some of the problems that we see in cities around the country as urban designers, as landscape architects. A big one is the sustainable sourcing of high performance soils. And it's also the problems with recycling. In particular, we're looking at glass, which we know is a high priority for a lot of cities right now. And the opportunity that we're aiming to bring to the fore today is this the possibility of bringing glass waste and food waste together for a locally sourced high performance planting soil. The case study that we're working on, the project for this year, we're working with our home city of Philadelphia, and we're looking at both the food waste stream, the form of food waste compost, and the glass stream. And the goal, of course, is to try to replace some of the materials that are typically mined and purchased by the city for green stormwater infrastructure, especially sands, construction grade sands. So as landscape architects, we see our position as being one where we can provide a proof of concept to regulators, to municipalities, to the industry, to recyclers, that this kind of closed loop process is possible, and that we can provide guidance moving forward to these groups about how to make this happen on the ground. So our previous years of research have been in partnership with some universities, Temple University and Penn, where we've looked at plant growth performance, we've looked at material analysis, life cycle, and also leachate quality and water flow through this type of soil mix. And what we've been able to move into now with the RMC over the last couple of years is refining a glass-based and food compost soil mix to look at both the performance of in terms of plant growth, but also in terms of the financial and economic and market side of producing this material. So this is where we are right now. We're working on a 2-year pilot study where we're going to be able to bring a small scale glass sand processing hub into the city with the support of Andela Products and our nonprofit here locally, Bottle Underground, to start producing glass sand and then to install a glass-based mix in a city-owned property. The property shown here on the bottom is a Parks and Rec property that was damaged in Hurricane Ida. And so this work is helping to rehabilitate a highly visible rain gardens system in the city. And importantly, what really the RMC and another partner, Circular Philly, are helping lead us through in this stage is to understand the opportunities for market development, both here locally in Philadelphia, but importantly also further afield. We see this idea as something that is highly scalable and applicable in any size town and city. And so that's where we really appreciate the partnership with RMC and where we have seen firsthand the really incredible value that Bob and Wade and the RMC bring to this kind of project. So with that, just say thank you again. Really happy to be here and to hear from all the other panelists today.
Okay, thank you very much, Rebecca, again with the Olin studio, and certainly we thank you for your involvement with us as well at the Recycling Market Center. I'll wait while Wayne gets to the presentation. I'm very pleased to introduce EPA Region 3 Administrator Adam Ortiz. And Adam, a bit on his background that brought him to the regional administrator's role here in the Mid-Atlantic. He spent a career in working with states and local stakeholders, and in his current role prioritizes infrastructure, climate change, and restoring the Chesapeake Bay, and most importantly, with a focus on equity in doing so. And before coming to EPA, he worked, like many people here on the call, in county government, first for Prince George's County and then Montgomery County in Maryland, two very prominent, very busy counties in the state, heading their environmental departments. Led innovative programs there for recycling and composting, green infrastructure, and with a focus on small business development. Prior to that, he served 3 terms as mayor of the town of Edmonston, a small town in Maryland, where proudly he ended many years of flooding in that town, and also laid claim to building the first complete green street within the community. Recreationally, he enjoys getting out to hike and paddle through the beautiful Maryland and Mid-Atlantic region. So we couldn't be happier to hear about some of the national concerns and national views on recycling and the strategic planning of it, and certainly how organics ties into that. So Administrator Ortiz, welcome, and thank you for your comments this morning.
Oh, thank you so much, Bob. It's such a pleasure to be here, and these issues and everything on your agenda is near and dear to my heart. As you mentioned, most of my career was at the local level in a small municipality, and I see lots of townships and local governments are on the roster, and also more than a decade at the county level, where I oversaw MRFs. I worked with a bunch of partners, Maryland Environmental Service and others, to build a regional organics composting facility. And I'm acutely aware of just all the challenges that local partners have in making recycling work. And that's from, public education and what people put out the curb, and that they're putting the right things out in their bins, which is an ongoing challenge, to the operation of facilities, staffing of facilities, and then, the opportunities from technology all the way to end markets and the circular economy. So it's been something I've leaned in on a lot, and I'm just so thrilled to be part of the conversation today. And as folks know, EPA under President Biden has been working hard to take recycling to a new level nationally. It was, remarkable in the 70s and 80s that recycling infrastructure, spread across the country and received investment from in small communities and large cities nationwide. But enough time has gone on that, we know where the strengths are, we know where the weaknesses and the opportunities are to take it to the next level. So the National Recycling Strategy, and if you haven't taken a look, please look it up. It's easy to find on the internet with a search. Focuses on a handful of things, 5 major objectives, but these are just part of the conversation. First, we want to improve markets for recycled economies, and thanks for our sponsors today for helping promote that. Infrastructure is so important that we're able to process the material effectively and efficiently and keep costs down and have precision in sorting. And on that point, contamination is a major point, and it's not, just public education. Many of us have been educating the public for decades, but there's also a lot of confusion in the labeling system, as we know. So we need to work with industry and manufacturers and consumer protection to make sure that that the recycling symbol is on products that are truly recyclable. We want to support circularity, circular economies, and importantly, to standardize measurement and improve and increase data collection. So we're all talking about the same stuff and comparing apples to apples. But this is a great time. We're encouraging creativity and innovation. And even though this is the national strategy, it cannot succeed without local input and participation. So we encourage you to lean in and give feedback through your state partners or directly to us in the region about what you think is working and what may not be working and how it could be better. But we know what the opportunities are, Bob. It's, people love recycling. It's one of the easiest and most accessible and most powerful ways for families and average folks to contribute environmentally to the sustainability of our communities, our towns, cities, counties, and states. Something that we do every day, and it's part of our decision making and the products that we choose, and it's part of our decision making, when we're picking which restaurants to go out and which ones have takeout, what kind of takeout containers that they have, and in the kitchen, do we put it in this bin or that bin? It's it's a way, it's a hands-on way to engage with our constituents, with our residents. And there's a lot of power in there. And some people say, well, does it matter if I put it in this bin or that bin? I'm just one person, but in this region, we literally have tens of millions of people. We have millions and millions of homes. If people make small actions and do things a little to help a little bit more, it really has a transformational impact across our states. And in the Mid-Atlantic region, we want to lead the country in the systems that we have and the programming that we have. So I could go on and on because I just love this stuff, but yeah, please take a look. And I'm tag teaming today. Melissa from our team is subject matter expert, has been involved in the strategy, who will do a deeper dive. But there's just a lot of good stuff in here. So just the messages I want to leave you with are just a few. One, and most importantly, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for all the work that you do, whether people are aware of it or not, the big decisions, the small decisions, all the things that you do to keep our recycling and composting systems moving. It matters, it's important, and we value it at EPA. Secondly, do not be shy. Please reach out to us if you have a best practice that you think should be shared. If there's something in the strategy that is missing or doesn't seem to have it quite right, or if there's a problem or challenge that you can't meet, do not be shy. Let's talk among ourselves. There's a lot of expertise on this call. There's a lot of expertise in the region. We're all dealing with the same issues, and we have a lot to learn from each other. So, so thank you, Bob. It's such an honor to be with you today. And again, we're all in this together. And I'm so pleased to just be part of the program today.
Well, thank you very much for those opening remarks. Much appreciated. I will let Wayne Bowen of our team curate questions and so forth and comments. But you know, we certainly value your support and the openness in your offer to reciprocate working with those of us on the call that, you know, certainly may need your resources.
Yeah, and while we're dealing with this slide, I just want to add, would also like everybody to lean in, and I know folks are aware of the historic infrastructure investments that are being made by the Biden administration, by our EPA, and Melissa will cover this in more detail, but we have a lot of funding available for recycling at you know, all points of the continuum, as well as composting. So we're going to be rolling out in time webinars and outreach through PAYDEP and other authorities and associations to get the word out. We want local communities to step up and apply for these infrastructure funds. But I'll hand it off to Melissa, who's our subject matter expert. Great to see you, Melissa.
Thanks, Adam. Wayne, are you ready for me to go, or do you need to do something else?
Yeah, I just want to quickly go over the agenda today. So I think most of you have seen that in when you're registered for the event, but quickly, as we know now, Melissa's going to be kicking off with some information from the EPA. And then after that, Hilary Nichols from the U.S. Composting Council is going to be talking about all the stuff, the great stuff that they're doing nationally and both locally. And then Scott Marks from the Recycling Market Center is going to be talking a little bit about our new circular merchant platform. It's an exciting new way to buy and sell recycled materials on a market platform. And then we're going to drill down into this regional and state impacts tract. Pennsylvania is in the process of completing a waste composition study. That report will soon be released, and Larry Holley from the DEP is going to be talking about that. And a related study that deals with food waste to energy. We have some folks from the energy office, plus Larry's going to be talking about that recently completed study. And then Corianne Manzel from the Center for Ecotechnology is going to be talking about a gap analysis study on food policy for the Mid-Atlantic region and Pennsylvania. And then I'm going to end the presentation today with a little bit of an update on permits in Pennsylvania with related to organics management. So with that, I'm going to have Melissa start. I'm going to read her biography quick here. Melissa spent the first 22 years of her EPA career as a project manager in the Superfund division, specializing in hazardous waste site investigation and cleanup. This time was divided between EPA Region 3 in Philadelphia and EPA Region 9, San Francisco. In July 2011, she switched gears and dove into voluntary programs in the materials management branch. Melissa now leads the sustainable management food team, and her overall focus is to build capacity for organics recycling in Region 3. Most notably, Melissa was responsible for the development of EPA's publication of the anaerobic digestion facilities processing food waste in the United States report series. Okay, Melissa.
Awesome. Thanks, Wayne. Can you see my cover slide?
I can. I hope everybody else can.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Wayne, it's funny, I forgot all that stuff was in my bio. I guess I don't have to say any of it now. That's good. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to speak today, Bob and Wayne. Like Adam, I really appreciate the opportunity to be involved in this event. My bio talked about the first 22 years of my career in Superfund and my move from Superfund to sustainable materials management. And the truth is I've been at EPA for over 30 years, which every time those words come out of my mouth makes me feel really old, but it's true. Like Wayne also mentioned, I lead the sustainable management of food team here in the Mid-Atlantic office. And the two main parts of that job are to work on reducing the amount of food waste generated and to keep it out of landfills once it is generated. And then also to build capacity for organics recycling in the region 3 states in the mid-Atlantic, which is something we definitely need. So there is a lot of exciting stuff happening in the world of recycling. You heard the big picture from Adam, and I'm going to drill down into some of the details of the National Recycling Strategy, and in particular, how the National Recycling Strategy relates to advancing organics recycling in PA, being that this is the Organics Summit. So just a quick outline of the topics that I'm going to be covering. The main topics are the new food waste and organic recycling strategy and how that strategy fits into the circular economy series that EPA is working on. Also, I'm going to talk a fair bit about recycling rate goals and how such goals being set by state and local entities, as well as other communities, really affect the amount of effort that goes into organics diversion. And last, but certainly not least, what you all want to hear about and what Adam previewed that I will be talking about is the funding available through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which we also refer to as the bipartisan infrastructure law. So those are the topics. And okay. So in his remarks, Adam talked about the circular economy and why it is so important to our overall recycling strategy. So what is the circular economy? It seems like it's a new buzzword. Everybody says it, and I'm not sure everybody really knows what it means. Why does it have such a big fancy definition? And I put the definition on the screen. You don't have to read it. I'm going to tell you what I think it means. So a circular economy really envisions a change to the current model where we get things like raw materials or resources, and then we make these things into products that we use. And when we're finished doing that, the products become waste. So that's the current model. And the intent of the circular economy is to move away from this practice. And instead, the circular economy refers to a system of economic activities. We would be really remiss if we didn't recognize that all of these recycling systems and almost everything we do is driven by economic activities and economic status. So the circular economy envisions some activities that are restorative to the environment, that enable resources to maintain their highest values, and then aims for the elimination of waste through superior design. The National Recycling Strategy, which Adam mentioned, was released in November of 2021 on America Recycles Day, actually. And Adam went over the 5 objectives in the strategy. The strategy, this first strategy, the National Recycling Strategy, focuses on traditional recycling materials. You're going to hear me talk about this a lot today. Glass, paper, metal, plastics, the traditional recycled materials. The National Recycling Strategy that was released in November will be followed by an implementation plan. So we're not just putting out a strategy. We are next going to be putting out an implementation plan that's going to provide more detail on the activities that are going to be needed to meet the goals of this strategy. And it's not just EPA activities, it's also activities that stakeholders can engage in. So you might be thinking, what about food waste? Well, the National Recycling Strategy is just one part of the big circular economy picture. And as Adam mentioned, it's the first in a series of strategies that are going to all work together and are intended to build a circular economy for all. So let's talk about the remaining parts of the big picture. Okay. So the circular economy is a strategy series, and the other strategies are currently under development. EPA has 5 more strategies in the works right now. And each strategy will be released for a 60-day public comment. So if you have a particular interest in any one of them, probably the organic strategy, I would imagine, you're going to have the opportunity to provide comment. It's going to go out for public comment. So the best way to know when the strategies are released and to get the information the quickest is to follow EPA's Sustainable Materials Management newsletter, if you don't already. I have a slide at the end of this presentation that's going to show you how to do that if you're interested. And this newsletter is also your best source of information on all SMM activities like grant opportunities. So I imagine that many of you are going to be interested in that as well. So I already said the series has 6 parts. Part 1 is the National Recycling Strategy, which was released in November. Part 2 is the Plastics Strategy. Part 3 is the Food Loss and Waste Organic Strategy, which I'm going to talk in more detail about in a minute. Part 4 is the Critical Minerals and Electronic Strategy. Part 5 deals with the built environment, and Part 6 deals with textiles. So you might be thinking, wow, that's a lot of strategies. Well, for now, it's a 6-part series, but it's not unheard of to think that additional parts could be added down the road. We are going to learn at each and every step of development of these strategies. And I wouldn't be surprised if we end up with more than 6 when everything is said and done. So one other thing I want to mention is that the circular economy series, with this series, EPA is intending to establish a 10-year vision, as well as a strategic direction for the Sustainable Materials Management Program. And this vision embraces all kinds of things, but as you would imagine, zero waste, circularity, sustainable materials management principles. It addresses climate change, and it also addresses environmental justice. So hold on one second. I had some other information about the environmental justice. Let's make sure I got it here somewhere. I don't want to forget to tell you. All right, looks like I'm missing it, so I'm just going to wing it and tell you. Oh, no, I got it. Okay, sorry about that. So let's move on to the food loss and waste strategy. So I know this slide is a little busy, but I'm going to walk you through all this information. The food loss and waste strategy, or organic strategy, is currently undergoing EPA review internally. So, people within the agency have seen it and are working on it and have commented on it. And we've been told that it's going to be released in May for public comment. It's possible that that could be pushed back a little bit, but I would keep your ear to the ground in May for the release of this document. Since it's still in draft and it is subject to change, I'm going to stick to high-level information about the strategy itself, just so that I don't tell you something that ends up changing down the road. And I also want you to know that EPA and the Department of Agriculture, USDA, are working together on this strategy. So rather than an EPA strategy, it's a United States strategy. And that is in line with the National Food Loss and Waste Goal. That was also a national strategy that was announced in 2015. And that goal, as I'm sure you're all aware, is to cut food waste in half by 2030. And in 2015, 2030 sounded really far away, but it's not that far away. So we've got a lot of work to do. The stated goal of the organic strategy is to prevent the loss and waste of organic materials where possible, and increase recycling of organic materials to support a circular economy for all, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and to build stronger communities. And I think it's important to call out here that this goal encompasses reducing greenhouse gas emissions and supporting underserved and vulnerable communities. These are 2 of this administration's main environmental priorities. And so, of course, they are also EPA's main environmental priorities. And that is across all programs. That's not, unique to the Sustainable Materials Management Program. These 2 priorities are weaved within all of our programs at this point in time. And it's also important to note that with regard to reducing greenhouse gases, the work on food waste is focused on prevention rather than downstream management. And here's why. This is because the majority of greenhouse gases occur during production, manufacturing, and transportation of food, not in the recycling part of food. So this is not to say, of course, that we should not bother to divert food waste from landfills. We definitely should for a variety of reasons. But the significant greenhouse gas reductions are going to occur as a result of actions that are taken upstream in the food supply chain. So if you're interested in this and the results, more details can be found in a report that EPA published in November titled From Farm to Kitchen, the Environmental Impacts of US Food Waste. That's what you see on the screen on the slide. And there will be a follow-up document to that, which will focus on the environmental impacts of food waste management. So stay tuned for that one. That will be coming down the pike soon, we hope. So let's get back to the organic strategy itself. So the strategy does three major things. It identifies a list of challenges to meeting the 2030 goal that I already mentioned, the cutting food waste in half by 50% by 2030. Number two, it lays out objectives for the organic strategy. And then for each of these objectives, it identifies a list of actions that are going to be designed to address the key challenges that were laid out under item 1. So, EPA acknowledges certainly that there are many challenges to achieving the national goal of reducing food loss and waste by 50% by 2030. I'm going to stop saying all that detail. I'm just going to say the national food loss and waste goal to make things run a little smoother. And this strategy identifies the challenges as follows. And they are also on your screen. So addressing obstacles that are facing overburdened and underserved communities is a big one. And like I said, that is across all EPA programs. Lack of outreach and education. You all, I'm sure, are very familiar with this. Recycling depends on outreach and education to be successful. And what gets cut first from the budget when you lose money? Outreach and education. So that has to be a key focus. Need for collaboration, insufficient infrastructure. That's certainly near and dear to my heart because that's what I work on. And Adam talked about that a little bit as well. Infrastructure is critical. And building infrastructure to be able to manage the organics that we divert. And then need for market expansion. I would say this a little differently. I would say need to promote the use of recycled materials, but this is how it's said in the strategy. And then next, the strategy outlines 4 objectives. And real quick, for those of you who may not be as familiar with this information, I wanted to go over a couple definitions. So food loss is defined as food that gets left out of the supply chain before it even reaches the retail sector. So before it gets to any store or establishment that you can buy it from. So in other words, once edible food that gets lost, either on the farm, in distribution, in transportation, in the processing sectors, so before it becomes retail. And then food waste is food that gets wasted in the retail, food service, and household sectors. So any food that goes bad in your house that you can't use, any food in a restaurant that is prep waste or plate scrapings, and then anything in say a grocery store that doesn't get sold. That is considered food waste because it is retail and later. So on to the objectives. So number 1, prevent food loss where possible. Number 2, prevent food waste where possible. Pretty obvious. Number 3, increase the recycling rate for all organic waste. I'm going to be talking more about the recycling rates in a little bit. And then 4, to enhance policies to support prevention and recycling of organic waste. And I think that's a big one. We see lots of policies, some more effective than others. some mostly on the West Coast or in New England and not necessarily here, some making their way here, but policies are really important in the overall scheme of things. So then the strategy for each objective highlights actions to address the key challenges. I'm not going to identify each of the strategic actions that are outlined in the strategy. I think that would be a little bit too much in the weeds for this presentation. And as I mentioned earlier, the document is still draft and subject to change, but please keep an eye out for this strategy. Again, to be released for public comment in May. It's going to be announced through the SMM newsletter. And, you know, I'm sure that there are many of you in the audience who are interested in this and would like to get your hands on this document. I know I was feeling that way before I saw the first draft. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and I'm going to start talking about recycling rates. So first, it's important to say up front that Pennsylvania does not have a statewide recycling rate goal. Before this presentation, I consulted with Larry Holley on this, and he explained that Pennsylvania DEP uses environmental and economic benefits for their recycling program metrics rather than an overall recycling rate goal. However, all Pennsylvania counties, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, have individual waste and recycling goals. So all counties include provisions in their 10-year county plan to meet a minimum recycling rate goal of 35%. And some municipalities have adopted recycling rate goals that are greater than 50%, and even some are looking at zero waste goals. So that's what I'm really going to be focusing on in the rest of this information about recycling rates. So the current national recycling rate goal is 50%. This goal is intended again to be met by 2030, coming fast. And this goal was announced in conjunction with the National Recycling Strategy when it was released last November. So what does this have to do with organics and organics diversion? Well, very often, high recycling rate goals help states and local governments and communities and other entities move in the direction of increased organics diversion. And what we've learned by spending a lot of time analyzing the data is that if you set a goal of 60% as your recycling rate or higher, it's essentially a food waste goal in disguise. And here's why I say that. So when you spend the amount of time analyzing data, as I do, kind of a data geek, from waste audits, waste characterization studies, you find some pretty specific patterns, pretty much no matter where you are. Now, Wayne mentioned, and Larry's going to be talking about today, Pennsylvania's recently conducted waste characterization study. It's called something else. I'm sorry, I didn't get the title right, Larry. Unfortunately, the data from that study was not available for me to use to illustrate this concept. So I'm going to show you the national data. The good news is that the results tend to be pretty similar across the board. So although I would have preferred to have the PA data, this is just as good. All right. So as I just said, local waste characterization data often aligns pretty closely with the national waste characterization data. The next two slides are from EPA's Facts and Figures report that was published in December of 2020. Some of you may remember this as the MSW characterization report. It is data that EPA has been collecting for upwards of 20 years. It just recently, in the past several years, it got its name changed to the Facts and Figures report, just in case anyone was confused about that. And the slides show the amount of waste generated and landfilled in each category. And the data is from 2018, which is the last year that the data is available for. Data always lags behind. And again, the report date is 2020. So this first slide that I have up on the screen shows the amounts generated. So paper, glass, metal, and plastics are on the right side of the pie. And of course, the most commonly recycled materials. Food waste, yard waste, and wood are on the left side of the pie. And then you'll see another category and a rubber, leather, and textiles category as well. So as I'm sure you all know, food waste is the second largest category of waste generated. It is second only to paper. But of course, a lot of paper gets recycled, which is why I'm going to also show you the landfill data. So this pie looks the same, slides look the same, but this is actually the landfilled data, the amount of waste landfilled data from the facts and figures report. And out of all the materials landfilled, food waste takes the top slot at over 24%. Again, I'm sure all of you know this. So this is really the first indication that if you're going to increase your recycling rate goal, looking at food waste is going to be a really attractive option because it is the highest category of waste landfilled. So going back to the generation data, let's see if I can do that. There we go. Okay, let's look at all the traditional recyclables. So paper, glass, metal, and plastics. Let's say you're a county, I'll just use a county example, and you capture all of the traditional recyclables, and you recycle them perfectly. Paper, glass, metal, and plastics. You can only reach a 48.3% recycling rate, even if you capture all of that material and you recycle it perfectly. 48.3%. So, of course, there are many local factors that are going to affect this scenario, right? Like degree of contamination in the recyclables, whether you're in a rural versus urban environment, whether it's an office setting or a residential setting. You know, these things are going to affect what recycling rate you could meet if you recycled all of those materials. But I think you get the idea. So as a whole, it's going to be very difficult, and in some cases impossible, to get above a 50% recycling rate without addressing food or other organic wastes, because this is the composition of the waste in the waste stream. So taking that one step further, let's say, in addition to perfect recycling of glass, paper, metal, and plastics, you have a significant increase in yard waste diversion. So if all yard waste were composted rather than landfilled, plus traditional recyclables, then you could achieve a 60% recycling rate. So we're moving up in the recycling rate category, but we're still not hitting the higher echelons of recycling rates. So to get above a 60% recycling rate, and many municipalities across the country are trying to do this. There's a lot of zero waste goals out there. There's a lot of 80% and higher recycling rate goals out there. The only way to do this, literally, the only way to do this is to address food waste. In addition to the materials that we already mentioned, if all of the generated food waste were composted or digested, then an 80% recycling rate could be achievable. Only then could an 80% recycling rate be achievable. So my point is, it's highly unlikely that 80% or greater recycling rate could be achieved without recycling food and yard waste. Whew, sorry if you hear my dog barking in the background. Someone just came to my door. So before I move on to the topic of grant funding, I want to explain why recycling rates are important. I would say tied even to some of the grant funding that we're going to be talking about in a little bit. In addition to all of the strategy documents that EPA is currently developing, there's a couple of other things in the works that are really fundamental to recycling rates, and I'm going to talk about them next. Okay. So I want to mention these two resources just briefly, because I think I would be remiss if I left them out, because they are related to the funding. And the first is the Recycling Measurement Guide. And the Recycling Measurement Guide is being developed to establish consistent definitions and measures to evaluate recycling systems across the country. And Adam mentioned this when he was talking about the objectives in the National Recycling Strategy. One of the main objectives in the National Recycling Strategy is to standardize measurement so that we can compare like to like across the board when we're working with improvements in the recycling system. So the recycling measurement guide also is going to include procedures to measure recycling rates to facilitate consistency, so that I'm sure you all know, and you see this every day, but everybody calculates their recycling rate a little bit differently. So one of the things the recycling measurement guide is going to do is to set out procedures to measure recycling rates so that everybody's following the same game plan. And then the model recycling toolkit, it's a little bit different. That's being developed in conjunction with the Consumer Recycling Education and Outreach grants, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. That is sometimes referred to as CREO, C-R-E-O. I think headquarters is still working on that on what acronym. Sorry, I blanked for a minute. Headquarters is still working on that acronym. I'm not sure what they're going to call it, but it's one of the grant programs that I'm going to talk about in a minute. So this model recycling toolkit will be designed for states, tribes, and local governments. And the toolkit is intended to help entities that are applying for these education and outreach grants, and to assist with measuring effectiveness of the awarded grants. So the model recycling toolkit and the recycling measurement guide are two pretty critical pieces to the puzzle, in addition to all of the other strategies that I already talked to you about. So EPA's been going full steam ahead for quite some time. So last but not least, I of course am going to talk about the money. So there we go. All right. These are the new federal grant programs that resulted from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And there is also some interaction with the Save Our Seas Act. Some of the money comes from that act as well. This money is especially for, or specifically for, I should say, states, tribes, and local governments. They are the only entities that are eligible for receipt of most of these grants. And these are brand new grant programs that are being built from the ground up as we speak. So the final details are still being worked out, but I'm going to tell you what I know. What you see on your screen is set in stone. These are the funding amounts, and these are the two programs that the grants are going to be called. So first, the Solid Waste Infrastructure for Recycling Grants, also known as SWIFR. It says recycling, but please know that this money is also eligible to be used for organics recycling. Organics recycling is included in the overall SWIFR grant scope. And as the slide says, it's $55 million a year for 5 years for a total of $275 million nationally. As I said, the structure of the grant programs is still evolving a little bit, but here's what we're being told right now. So it looks like this money, this $275 million SWIFR money, $55 million a year, is going to be awarded in a hybrid type of way. And I say that, and what I mean by that is some of the grant money will be competitive grants, and some of the grant money is going to be non-competitive grants. So that makes a big difference when you're thinking about whether or not you're going to, try to apply for some of these grants. So for the grants that are relevant to you, the best info that we have is that in year one, which is 2022, although it's probably going to be pushed into 2023 at this point because there's so much work to be done. So in this first year, 15 million will be used for competitive grants for local governments. Okay, so for the local governments out there, $15 million for local grants. Again, it's nationally. But if you divide that by 10, if it is distributed evenly throughout the states throughout the regions, that's over $1 million worth of grants for the Mid-Atlantic local government entities. So make note of that. $25 million is going to be used for non-competitive grants for states. And the remaining 15 million will be used for non-competitive grants for tribes. So I'm not sure I saw any tribal representation on the attendee list, but I just wanted to put that out there as well. So just a couple more things about the competitive versus non-competitive grants. So first, for the non-competitive grants, which is the majority of the money in this first year. The way it's anticipated to work right now is that all of the states and eligible entities, so states, territories, obviously DC, will be notified, and EPA will request that you let us know whether or not you want to participate in the non-competitive grant program. And so we expect that that's going to happen sometime in July, the notification. Now, this is important because $25 million is a lot of money for non-competitive grants. So break that up, 10 regions, so $2.5 million per region for non-competitive grants. Now, it might end up being a little bit skewed because some regions have other, but assume over $2 million, let's say. That's a lot of money. And so there's what, 6 states, including DC, in region 3. So it's a lot of money. And it's one thing for us to say to you, are you interested in getting, and working with us on a non-competitive grant for sustainable materials management for X amount? It's another for the states to be prepared to do that. So, that's going to mean you're going to have staffing available to work on it. You're going to have bandwidth available to manage it, because grants of this size are pretty unwieldy. So, so I'm throwing all of this information out just so that for those of you who this applies to, you can start thinking about it. And then as far as timing for the competitive grants for local government entities, we expect that a request for applications for these grants will come out by the end of September. So that's a lot of information. The second category of grants is the Consumer Recycling and Education and Outreach Grants, or CREO, which I mentioned when I was talking about the toolkit. This one, as you see on your screen, is $15 million a year for 5 years, for a total of $75 million nationally. And as I already mentioned, as part of this effort, EPA has been directed to develop a model recycling program toolkit for states, tribes, and local governments for use in carrying out this grant program. So the toolkit is integrally related to this money and these grants. I do not at this time have any information about the timing for the RFA, or request for applications, for these grants. But again, the SMM newsletter is going to be a good source of information for that type of announcements. So in summary, I really just want to say, this is more money than we've seen in this program in a very long time. Actually, I've never seen this much funding, but I've only been seriously working on grants for only the last several years, but it's a lot of money. Congress is serious about addressing recycling in this country, and they are really showing it with this financial support for these programs through EPA. So we here in Region 3 are really hoping that our states and tribes and local governments will be able to take advantage of these opportunities. And that's why we're spending a lot of time communicating and getting this information out to everybody. So sure that even though I've talked for a very long time about grants, there's still going to be some questions, and we'll have an opportunity to take those at the end. left that one in by mistake. Okay, so this last slide is what I told you I would show, which is the information on how to sign up for the newsletter to get all of the announcements. If you go to www.epa.gov/SMM for Sustainable Materials Management, and on that front page in the bottom right-hand corner where I have it outlined, that is where you go to sign up for the newsletter if you're not already on it, and if you're interested in getting information about the stuff that I've talked about today. So again, thank you so much for asking me to talk. I hope this information is useful to you. And here's my contact information. Wayne has a copy of my slides, which he will be sharing with you. And I think this is also being recorded. Like Adam said, reach out if you have questions. I am the Sustainable Food Management team leader, but we also have Dave Iacono in our office, who's also part of this program today. Or, I mean, he is here, he is listening. He is our recycling contact. And, if you have any questions, certainly reach out. We'd love to talk to you. And that's all I've got, Wayne. Feels like I've talked for a really long time.
Not really.
I apologize if I went over.
No, you're just about right on time. We have a couple minutes left, but just could you please just confirm that these grants are eligible only for local tribes and state governments?
That is the information that we're being given right now. So there's still some internal debate going on. There may be some eligibility for nonprofits and that type of entity. You can always partner with other entities as part of your projects. But for now, the focus is on states, tribes, and locals.
Right. Okay. But there is definitely this possibility of partnering with a private sector entity.
Yeah, and Wayne, I think the Recycling Market Center its status as a quasi-governmental agency is included. It's a pretty broad description of state.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Melissa.
If that's what you're asking, Wayne.
No. So okay, we're gonna switch gears now. But just some people have asked for links and so forth for certain documents. So just so you're aware, we're developing a resource page or a resource document with all the PowerPoint slide decks with the bios, contact information, and also links to websites and other information. So that link is going to be placed in the tomorrow. You'll receive a thank you for attending email from Zoom, and we're going to put that link in there. So just look out for that. And also this webinar is being recorded, and we're going to have that available for viewing at a later date. So just so you guys are aware of that. Okay, our next presenter is Hilary Nichols from the U.S. Composting Council. She is the Market Development Coordinator and the SDA Program Manager. She runs the SDA program, which is the sought-after Seal of Testing Assurance Certified Compost Labeling Program and the Compost Analysis Proficiency Lab Program. Hilary works with committees to create and compile resources to market compost use through USCC's Market Development Committee. She keeps on top of compost use stakeholder needs through USCC's SDA Advisory Committee and organizes research to stay on the cutting edge of compost parameter test methods and lab proficiency testing through the CREF Standards and Practices Committee. Prior to the USCC, she has 20 years of experience in the horticultural industry, serving as senior horticulturist at the Atlanta Botanical Garden and writing for Fine Gardening magazine as a frequent guest speaker at University of North Carolina's TV, the Almanac Gardener. And she's a leader in both the National and Georgia Perennial Plant Association. Hilary holds a Bachelor of Science in Horticultural Science from NC State. I'll turn it over to Hilary.
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak. It's a pleasure. Well, I want to start off today asking all of you, is all compost the same? I work with horticulturists all the time, being in that side of the industry. And I hear people say, yes, I'm going to go buy compost for my project. And I know all of you in the room know better. You sift compost, you create it, you mix together the feedstocks, you're in the thick of it. And you know that there's a lot that you can do to make your compost different from your competitors. But unfortunately, in the horticulture industry, there are a lot of people that don't realize that not all compost is the same. So that can cause some problems when you have people that want to use what they consider a consistent material in their garden, in their landscape, for a particular engineering project. When they go to use it, they could get results that they're not looking for. And that can cause a problem for the industry if they're not happy with the results. They will associate their results and not being happy with that with the product in general, with compost, not necessarily with the vendor, or not necessarily realizing that the particular characteristics of the compost they have in front of them is better suited for a different purpose than the one that they have. So how can the industry tackle this issue that not all compost is the same, and we want all of our customers to be happy with what we have? So that is why the U.S. Composting Council 20 years ago created the Seal of Testing Assurance SDA Certified Compost Program to label compost. But unfortunately, over the years, this logo has gotten, and the certification has gotten so well respected that people assume that the logo just means that it's certified to be wonderful. And a lot of people are making this assumption that if it has this well-respected seal on it, that it means that it's going to be wonderful for whatever they want. So it started to drift off in a direction that's not the original intent of the program. And thankfully, we have a bunch of committed volunteers in the industry, even one from Pennsylvania, Laurel Valley Soils, Suzanne Longacre, who are working with us on our market development committee and many other committees to help bring this back on track and to help support the industry. So we believe, and this is what the program is all about, that quality is in the eye of the consumer. That, as I said earlier, compost decisions, relate to a lot of different things. Are you looking for an erosion control product? Are you looking for something to incorporate or something to top dress? So the compost that you're looking for is not one size fits all. So the Seal of Testing Assurance helps you with those decisions. It's just a labeling program. And with our committee, we have developed this new branding to help better communicate the intent so that everybody all the way around is happier with the results that they get. So the buzzwords that we have for this are clarity, consistency, and confidence. And we want all of you to help communicate these words to everyone that you know and help spread them so that there'll be a better understanding of what it is, and in the end, a better desire to use this brand and products with this brand. So let's dig into that a bit. Clarity, what's that all about? That is about the labeling that we do with the SDA Certified Compost Program. We ask that compost manufacturers test their product frequently, and then they label it with the test results that come back from the lab. So with those labels, customers can use the correct product for the exact purpose that they want to use that product for, that's appropriate for that purpose. And a part of the program is that compost manufacturers need to disclose those test results so that customers can make that decision. So this helps to show that the industry is really being honest and transparent about our products. We also ask that those products are tested consistently with this consistent testing frequency so that, yeah, a compost manufacturer could go to one of the STA labs and ask for their product to be tested using the STA test methods, but that would just be a one-off. One of the values of the program is that we ask that compost be tested frequently so that customers can look at a series of test results over time. Because compost, as we all know, is an ever-evolving material. And if you can see, okay, they may have drawn in different feedstocks over this past year, and they've done their best to stay consistent with what their end product was, but we can actually look at those test results and see how good of a job they did, and how likely it is that the piece of paper we're looking at is going to be the product that we apply on our land. The U.S. Composting Council has also worked to standardize the test methods. So this is something I think not a lot of us think about, that when you go to a lab and you get your product tested, you expect it's going to be appropriate test methods, and you expect that there's going to be some kind of standardization. But unfortunately, for a long time, there hasn't been standardization for compost testing. People have been using test methods that are more appropriate for water quality, or they've been using test methods that are more appropriate for soil. And people aren't always using test methods that are built and meant for compost. So that's one thing that the STA program does, is ensure that these test methods are going to be appropriate, they're going to be consistent. When you get a test result from the STA program, you're going to be able to look at products across the United States and across that one state and compare those test results apples to apples. And that's something that without the U.S. Composting Council's STA program, you wouldn't be able to compare those test results apples to apples, and you might not even realize that you weren't comparing things apples to apples. So that's really important that this program offers that standardization. And I already mentioned earlier how wonderful it is that we have this confidence in this logo, and by building this clarity and consistency around how we communicate what this logo is about, we will further increase the brand value of people using this logo. And the benefit to everyone is the more that we use this logo appropriately, the more that customers are going to have confidence in the logo, and the more that other people are going to start getting their products registered. And this protects the industry. Like I mentioned earlier, if somebody gets a product and they end up using it in a way that maybe it was their mistake that they used it in an inappropriate way, but if they do that, that starts to put a black eye on the industry if they use products inappropriately and then are unhappy with the result because they don't realize it's something that they did and not something that product did. So the more that we can build confidence in this logo and get more people involved in using this logo, the more that the whole industry will grow in compost use. So I have a couple comparisons here so that you can relate it to some other common things that we have in our lives. Cereal boxes. Can you imagine if you took some cereal from the aisle in the grocery store and you looked at the side and it didn't have a nutrition label? Wouldn't that feel kind of sketchy if you couldn't see what was in it, both the ingredients that were in it as well as the nutrients? It would be really uncomfortable because we've really grown used to that. So this is something that we're doing with the STA program. It's offering this really similar label on compost products. I'm hoping that going forward, as we continue to grow, that more and more agencies like the EPA and the natural resources organizations will help to promote the use of this program so that we can have a label that is just as consistent as this, to where you would look at compost and say, wait, it doesn't have a label? What's going on here? Right now, we have more people that are not in the program than in the program, and we need your help growing that because this is a service to everyone in the United States. We also want to compare it to the Carfax. When you wonder, okay, there's this car that I'm interested in buying, should I or should I not? You have this centralized place to go to look, to see the record about what's been going on with that car. We want to provide that similar record for compost so that when you look at a particular product, you have an idea about the history of what's been going on with that product. How has that facility been doing? How likely it is that you are going to be happy, that you know what you're getting, and that's going to be appropriate for your use. So brand awareness. Here are some brands that are commonly out there. We are all very familiar. The McDonald's M, right? All it takes, you can see in this picture, all it takes is half of their logo for us to know what's going on and who they're all about. So that is really important when you are working to sell your compost or you're looking to buy compost. When you see that STA logo, that brand awareness and all of us working together to build consistency in what that brand awareness is really, really important. So part of building that brand awareness is making sure we use the logo appropriately. It is an information disclosure logo, and it is meant to be used just on products, not on companies. That's really important, and I think that's something that we haven't enforced as well as I wish we had in the past. I know going forward, that's something that we're tackling and we're working on, helping you all understand that it's for individual products only. That if you want to show pride and show how thorough you're being and in supporting the industry and being a big part of the industry, what you want to do is become a U.S. Composting Council member and use this proud soil builder logo in the left-hand corner. Not the plain U.S. Composting Council logo, just the proud soil builder logo. And that's one that you can use for your entire company. So our reach is powerful. We're already 315 facilities that have STA products around the United States, and we have more to grow. And this is where we need people who are STA facilities to reach out to your competitors and get them to join, because that is not hurting you as reaching out to your competitor to get them to join this program. That's helping you, because the more that we have the entire industry enrolled in this program, the more likely that consumers aren't going to jump to incorrect assumptions about a product they weren't happy with and apply it to your product. So we also have a bunch of DOTs, 24,000 landscape architect professionals and commercial landscapers, home gardeners. This is a really important product that we need to make sure that everyone is really excited about. So we need your help. We're going out, we're doing a lot of work to educate different stakeholders. We need your help to educate the people that you work with to make sure that they know what it is that this STA logo is all about and what it's not about. It's not about saying that material is quality. It's about saying that we're labeling that material. We're also checking to make sure they're in compliance with government permits. And we are making sure that they are complying with the EPA's regulations for metals and pathogens, holding all feedstocks to the level required for biosolids. So educate your staff, landscapers that you work with, supply yards, government agencies, general public, through Facebook and Instagram and your webpage and one-on-one conversations with them. Help us get the word out. We have resources to help you get that word out. The Market Development Committee has developed brochures and other marketing materials, as well as compost use fact sheets on several different compost uses. And recently, the Compost Research and Education Foundation has come out with these amazing return on investment fact sheets. There are 10 of those. This is an example over here on the right that you can use as you do this outreach. We've also put a lot of great benefits of compost and how to use compost, different types of equipment that can be used to spread compost up on our website. So please look at our website, use those resources, direct your consumers to go to that website and look at what we have up there. We're a third party. We help show that people should believe what you're saying when you say that compost is great. It's not just you, it's the entire industry that's supporting you. We're putting together a lot of webinars, and we've put together webinars in the past. So make sure and reach out and take advantage of what we put together there to tell you how to use these resources, as well as make sure to come to the conference. We have speakers that are telling you from their experience, researchers as well as marketers, about the benefits of compost. And you can hear from yourself how to promote the compost use at the conference, but also you can encourage your specifiers and your end users that you work with to go to the conference, especially the one coming up. Compost 2023 is going to be in California, and we hope that we'll have a big presence on speakers for end users targeting that group to make sure that they understand that we are really well considering the information that we're putting out about compost use. I also want to make sure that you're aware that coming up the first week of May is the Compost Research and Education Foundation's International Compost Awareness Week effort. Their logo here for this year is up in this round sticker. And this is a great time to get the message out about compost use, the benefits of compost, and use all of our resources during this time. You can also do lunch and learns with your primary stakeholders. So I want to call attention to what one of our committee members did. Clinton Sander is one of the chairs of the Market Development Committee. He's out of Colorado, and he saw an article that was written in the Associated Landscape Contractors of Colorado, and he reached out and he, told him a little bit about our new branding with what STA was, and they reached back to him and they asked him to write an article for them. And so what's up on the screen is what he wrote back to them about what compost is and what STA is. This is something that all of you can do as well. And if all of you did this, it would go a long way to help spreading the education about what compost is and how you can make sure that you're happy with the results that you get. So I want to go on to say that we're not just asking you guys to do this outreach to make sure that people know about this. We are also doing this ourselves, boots on the ground. So the Compost Research and Education Foundation and the U.S. Composting Council teamed up to achieve this EPA Region 3 grant. And I definitely want to thank Melissa. I'm sad that she's already gone, but I want to thank her for being a part of giving us this grant and all the work that we did with it. We really accomplished a lot, and there is a lot of ongoing work to continue this work on this with this grant. So the first step that we did is we created the list of stakeholders, and it is amazing to me how much time it took just to create the list of stakeholders for 6 states. We sunk a lot of time into that, and we came up with 151 specifiers that work for the DOT, the Department of Environmental Quality, and other people that are related to building specifications in those 6 states. So to gather that, we did a lot of legwork, just looking at people's websites and calling people up, cold calling, asking if people had other people to refer us to, calling composters in the area. And through all of this, I have realized that all of you who are working to sell compost to people who have projects in your area, it is really hard to know who to talk to and what those specifications are for you to reach out to sell to people who already know they want to buy from you. So I have sympathy for you, and I see that we have some more work to do as an industry to help connect specifiers and composters together to make that connection easier for you to make. It supports everybody to know who to talk to. Then next, we held a workshop to address the needs that we heard. So after we reached out to the stakeholders, we did a survey to ask them, okay, what are your specifications that you have for compost? What are the specifications that you have just for growing plants or controlling erosion in general that might be opportunities for compost? And we asked them what they knew about STA in general and what they knew about compost in general. And some of what we heard was surprising. So in that workshop, we had about 72 specifiers that came, and we had some rock star speakers. We had Brett Fawcett, who came and spoke about the research that he's done on erosion control. We had Gregory Evangelho come, who is a researcher that talked about phosphorus and how there's slow release phosphorus in compost. We had Donald Pearson talk with us, who is a recently retired Department of Transportation professional in North Carolina. He has 30 years of experience in that. So he was able to speak essentially to his peers about what he's experienced with how much he enjoyed compost. And our executive director, Frank Franciosi, spoke, and I spoke as well as the STA program manager. So then after that, we had follow-up meetings state by state, where we met and said, what did you hear? Did you have any feedback? Do you see more barriers that you need us to address and talk to you about? And there were 108 people that were there for that. So just briefly, this is some of what we heard some of the barriers are that are things that need to be tackled. One of the barriers is that specification types vary wildly across the United States. There are specifications that are accepted, and then there are others that are just approved methods. And what we're building towards is trying to get compost to be the preferred method. And the difficulty here is that as people are slowly dipping their toe in the water with getting more and more specific about compost, we need to make sure they go through that cycle quickly, because at the beginning of that cycle, they're just saying that you can have compost if you want, and they're not talking about the very specific characteristics of compost they want for their project. So it's a big chance that they could end up creating a specification that could give them a false impression about how wonderful compost is. Also, there are a lot of people who don't know products that in these specifications, they're used to just going to a specification, it says, buy this product, make sure it has this seal, and then go, just kind of a paint by numbers. Or they're using these different types of programs where it encourages them to have that mindset where they add in a little bit more detail, and then it says, get a compost of this particular specification. Well, those numbers aren't quite sophisticated enough for compost yet. And it's really creating an opportunity for a mistake to happen. We want to make sure that everyone is using what the U.S. Composting Council as an industry is recommending for how to use compost. So some of the other concerns that DOTs have is around nutrient leaching, not understanding that salts are frequently an indicator of nutrient level in compost, and that compost isn't a method to increase or decrease the pH. They also have identified that it's really difficult for them in different areas to be able to source enough compost from a single manufacturer to get their project completed. And that's something that they're looking for. And they're looking to be able to search for compost with the particular test results that they're looking for them to purchase. And right now, that's trial and error. I'm hoping the industry might be able to help that in the future. So here are some of the solutions that we could do as an industry to help DOTs have more confidence in compost. Working to source, separate trash, and talk to our suppliers of our feedstocks to make sure that they're doing a better job educating people so that the material that you get is cleaner before you even get it, both for man-made inert trash as well as for persistent herbicides, making sure that you are screening that material before you get it to make sure that you're going to make your customers happy. There has been a concern with end users about nutrient leaching, and compost is great because it makes soil into a sponge, so it holds water better. And if it's holding that water, the nutrients aren't moving off site. So from the beginning, compost is great for holding nutrients on site. But if customers need additional confidence, you can add iron or alum to your compost to create a blend that nutrients will stay tighter to the soil in. Some other things that we need to do as a composting council is work to improve the TMECC test methods for salts and phosphorus and beneficial microbes. And I misspoke, it's not the Composting Council, it's the Research and Education Foundation. They are taking over updating the TMECC test methods. The other thing that we can do as an industry is to gather behind one compost map. And this is kind of my soapbox. I've done some research looking into almost every state has their own compost map. And sometimes even haulers and composters have their own compost map with all of their distributors on it. If we had one map as an industry, we could be a lot more efficient with our resources as an industry to create the most amazing map that's the most helpful for everyone. And also it would direct people's attention and brand awareness to one map. The more solutions are, we need all of our allies to support the industry's compost use templates. We spend a lot of research energy putting together these templates for how to use compost to make sure that people are going to be happy with the results they get. And we really need all of your help supporting using these templates. When people go off and create their own specifications, sometimes they're creating something they're not going to be as happy with. We have a lot of DOT specs that we gathered in this project, and some of them are already up on our webpage. So another way to help is to share those DOT specs and have DOTs look at what their neighbors are doing. And don't take that as the best way to do it, because I think all of you know, we all get busy and then we end up using a method that's not necessarily our favorite. There's pros and cons. And if somebody talked to us about it, we would tell them, okay, I wish it was a little bit different here and there. So when you see those DOT specs, make sure and take that with that grain of salt, that those people are going to have additional commentary about things that they would suggest you do differently from what they did. Some other things that we can do is to help with continuing education. And the people to target as you do this are consultants, because in a lot of cases, it's not DOTs writing their own specs. They're reaching out to consultants to write their specs. So if you can help make sure that consultants are on the cutting edge of research and recommendations, that'll help. Also helping to educate contractors, because when specifications are written really vague and people are given a lot of best management practices they can choose between, they use what's familiar to them. They don't necessarily use the one that's the most successful. So help educate contractors about what that is. And one of the ways you can do that is to support and help people have case studies. This is something where when you see it with your own eyes on your own site, and you have a composter that helped you tackle a troublesome spot, you are sold, right? You are sold for life. You know that is what you want to do. And all of this is so important because, as I said in the beginning, if people are using compost in ways that we don't advise, the type of compost that's not meant for the type of purpose that they're using it for, they're going to get burnt. And once they're burnt, they're not really likely to use compost again. We want to prevent that. We want to make sure that people are happy because they use compost appropriately. So encourage people to use the Certified Compost Program for that clarity, consistency, and confidence that this logo gives them through its labeling. Here's the map of everyone we have right now around the United States who has a product in the program. Coming up, we are building a new database. We have been working on it for a year. We have a lot more functionality we're going to add to it. Part of that is making the map searchable. So far, we nationally have 355 products. Help us fill in this map. Help us cover this in green dots so that when people look for compost, they don't stumble across a material that's not labeled and then end up being burnt by that material. Help us make sure that everybody knows what's in their compost. So I've said this over and over throughout this, but just want to make sure to say it one more time. We are here together as an industry, making sure that we are creating consistent messaging, and we need your help with that, promoting this STA program. Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me speak. I am sorry, Wayne, I went over a little bit, but here's my contact information. This is actually my last presentation. I am leaving to go backpack the Appalachian Trail and blog about horticulture. And so this is the contact information for the wonderful staff that will be staying behind to help you with all of your questions about STA.
All right, thank you, Hilary. It's been great working with you over the years. So good luck on the trail and stay safe. All right, next up is Scott Marks. He's with the Recycling Market Center. He's also a program manager, and he's going to be talking about the new circular merchant platform. So take it away, Scott.
All right, thanks, Wayne. Again, my name is Scott Marks. I'm a program manager here at the Recycling Market Center. I do have an IT background in a past life, so this project was fun to do. And what we're looking at here is www.circularmerchant.com. You can see it looks like a pretty standard website. It is what they call a responsively designed website. So, and I'm going to squeeze this and hopefully you guys will see. So you can see it's got the little hamburger bun up here now instead of the, so the point is that this will work fine if you're on your cell phone, an iPad, a tablet, just using the native browser on there. We also have an app version of this available at both the Google Play Store and the Apple iTunes. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at the Circular Merchant, and basically what it is, it's a listing where businesses or municipalities or individuals can place things that they have no longer have need for in the marketplace. If we go ahead and you see up here, I'm not logged in yet. Now you don't have to log in to see what's going on. So if we look here, we'll see what all the listings are. And here, as you can see, some of the listings that are in here. And in fact, I think there's an organics one here. So if I go ahead and click on this one here, you can see this is a company here in Pennsylvania posted this particular compost mulch and soil products. And you can see, kind of looks like any sort of marketplace where you've got pictures, you have a description, and so forth. So as I already said, you can see all this stuff without creating an account. I'm going to go ahead and actually post an item so you can see how to do that. So in order to post an item, you do have to create an account. And the way you would do that would be this register link that I have down here. If you go ahead and click on that, you'll create an account and then you can go ahead and log in. So I'm just going to go ahead and log in with my account that I have here already. All right, and now you can see up here, this is kind of like my area here. So like, let's say that I want to create an ad. And so I'm going to go ahead and create an ad. And then this is all of the contact information associated with me. So I'm going to go ahead and finish filling this out real quick. And you can choose a category. And we do have an organics and composting category in here. You can include as many images as you like in there. Okay, now what I want to show you here real quick. Now there is a price field in here, and these ones that have these little red asterisks, as you might have figured out, these are the fields that are required to fill out. Now we do require a price in here, but let's say like, you're looking at these broken wooden pellets. How do you assign a price to that even? You may just want to get rid of them. However, if I did know a price, I could just go ahead and put the price in there, okay? Or if you go ahead and just put 0 in there, what it's going to do is, well, I'll show you when I pull the listing up. Now, restricted use here. This is a field we have in here to kind of make sure that people have assessed that it's not hazardous material or so forth. And then you can enter a location for this thing here. You can see this little diamond thing over here. This is the location service, and there it happily pulled up my home address there. And now I can go ahead and click on preview here. So this is how it will appear after you've posted it. And you remember I put that 0 in the price category. What that does then is it just throws this contact for pricing in. That way, you can figure out, what if you might want to get something for it. It just allows a dialogue about something that maybe wasn't so easy to price. Let's see, what else can I show you about this account here? So the other thing is when you create your account, when you log in, or when you create your account for the first time, you can be notified on these various categories. So like, let's say that you were interested in anytime somebody would post an organics type product, in there, then you're going to get an email notification that there's something in there. I happen to have them all selected here because I like to see stuff go by, and I'm still testing things out here. So I think that's all I really have to talk about here. I'm almost out of time already. Wayne, I think that's it. Now you've heard me talk about this enough. I kind of whipped through it in 8 minutes there. There's anything I missed real quick?
No, just so everybody knows that we've done some training sessions on this. So on our website, there is a video of I think 5 of Scott's sessions. They're put together. So it's a more detailed training of how to use the app. But if you have any questions, give Scott a call and he can help you out. And it's not just for Pennsylvania. This is for anybody, in the country, basically, or, in the region, particularly, if, someone has a compost site near the Maryland border, a lot of customers are probably from the Maryland state or, Jersey, Delaware, whatever. So it's not just focused on Pennsylvania. It's statewide, it's region wide, national wide. So, okay, thanks, Scott.
Yeah, and you can see there's a variety of materials in here already. We've got baled plastic, there's cardboards, asphalt shingles, tires, et cetera, et cetera. So I appreciate sharing a little bit of your time here this morning. So if you do have any questions about this, you can email me smarks@pennrmc.org. You can find it at the website as well. Or you can call me 717-948-6660. We're just in the process of rolling this out, so we're happy to help anybody who needs a little help creating an account or getting things going, or even just wants to talk about if maybe this application would work for your particular business. So again, thanks for your time, and Wayne, back to you.
So our next presenter is Larry Holley. He's the division chief of the Waste Management and Planning Bureau of Waste Management, Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. Larry has been with the department since 1988. His 32 years with the Department of Environmental Protection has been spent in various divisions of the waste program. Larry spent 2 years in hazardous waste reporting, 1 year in the remediation program, 3 years in recycling, 3 years in the assistant director's office, and the past 24 years in his current position. Larry is responsible for the management and administration of the Commonwealth's recycling, e-waste recycling, waste planning, and recycling market programs with an annual budget of $43 million. These programs provide financial assistance to municipalities and counties to support the recycling and planning program. His division also houses the recycling market section, which was created specifically to provide information and technical assistance in the area of marketing recyclables and implementing the Commonwealth's electronics recycling programs. Larry received his bachelor's degree from West Virginia University in biology with a minor in chemistry. Okay, Larry.
Hey, Wayne, do you hear me? Or my sound coming through loud and clear?
Yep, you're loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, thanks everybody. It's my pleasure to be here to present. I promise to be fast. I've got 15 minutes, but there's a couple of things that I just need to respond to a little bit and give some Pennsylvania perspective from things you heard earlier. The Commonwealth prides itself in looking at the environmental benefits and economic benefits of recycling. Simply, it's important and people can relate jobs and things that they do every day to the environment. There's no other environmental program that more Pennsylvanians participate on a daily basis. So that's really important to us. We are redoing the recycling economic impact study in 2023. Currently, our data is 2017. Just a snippet of that. There's 66,000 direct jobs and 110,000 indirect jobs. So that basically means everybody in Pennsylvania has a family, friend, relative that works in the recycling and waste industry. Very important to us. Just to let everybody know, we are undertaking a comprehensive look at Act 101, our recycling law, in an effort to modernize it and take advantage of new technology and things that have changed since 1988. It's available on our website. Just real quick, I want to make sure that we put this out there as a challenge that everybody needs to be mindful of with Pennsylvania in mind. the capacity for single stream processing capacity is limited. And that's something that we need to look at. Today, you're hearing a lot about recycling and composting, but we need to look at the front end of, what we do to reduce, most importantly, reduce waste. And then when we get to the back end, what capacity do we have to process that? You'll hear us talk about it in the energy office, where we looked at capacity for anaerobic digestion. With that said, and out there, I will jump right into a quick update on our waste characterization study. We did it in cooperation with MSW consultants. Whoops, there we go. Just real quick overview of what a waste characterization study is. It's a look at what's in the waste stream. We look at it to look at what types of facilities we need to allow us to plan and target materials, target education, all those things you heard about. You don't know if you don't know what you're dealing with. There's a quick figure here that shows, the table shows our numbers back in 2002. And I'll talk a little bit about how that has changed in a minute. So it's a long time without a study. Actually, it was too long, so it was time to redo it. We wanted to update the study, and we wanted to have a comparison that would be comparable for parts of the 2002 study and to look at it in 2021. So you could say apples to apples. However, we recognize there's a significant need to gather more information that wouldn't necessarily be comparable because we've learned a lot of things since then. What did we look at? We looked at single family homes, commercial, institutional, and self-hauls for points of generation. We looked at it from rural settings, urban settings, suburban settings, and we looked to have a high number of samples, so it would be significant. Just a real quick differences between the two studies is that COVID, of course, impacted everything we do. It came up with several delays. I've been telling people that this data was going to be available a year ago, back, maybe a couple of months ago. And through COVID and things that we had with our procurement process on the agency's shoulders, we got delayed. I'll talk about what we expect our timeline to be in a little bit. Just real quick, we looked at all 4 seasons, throughout the year of 2021. We utilized 13 facilities. We spent full weeks at 6 of the 7 facilities. Again, those are the generating sectors that we looked at: residential, commercial, institutional, self-haul, from urban, suburban, and rural demographics. 58 materials were categorized. When you look at the total number of refuse samples, 13,000, total pounds, 278,000, and days in the field, 125. So it definitely was an all-inclusive comprehensive study. The MRF audit was 2 seasons, 2021. Sorting was performed at 8 facilities. Later, I'll give a shout out to the facilities who participated. We looked at curbside sort, dual stream, and single stream. One size definitely does not fit all. That's something that we continue to learn. We continue to let folks know that everybody can't house a single stream facility within a reasonable travel distance. Long hauling for 4 hours is not going to be acceptable practice. Real quick look at the categories. The new categories from 2021 versus the original categories from 2002. One of the things that I'd ask you to pay attention to, particularly for this group, is the organics, the edible packaged, edible non-packaged, and inedible. That's an important delineation when we go to look at our waste reduction efforts. What's in there that we can still deal with. We don't have the numbers to share with you today, but they will be available. Talk about that in a moment. Just a quick side, and Wayne's going to make sure you have all these so you can look at the details and ask follow-up questions. This is the breakout of the sampling seasons and how it went, how many were done. Here's the points of interest that I definitely wanted to share with you. And I'm sure that this is what a lot of folks are clamoring to get their hands on. As you can imagine, there was a significant reduction from 2002 to 2021 in magazines, catalogs, and printed materials in general. It's a fraction of what it was when we first did it back in 2002. OCC, as you can imagine, with regards to the move to in-home shopping and more online shopping, the amount of OCC is amazing that you see in the waste and the recycling stream. Significant increases in non-container plastics. What you need to know about this is plastic is lighter weight packaging. There's several different types of plastic in the waste stream, and it's all over. This is one of the challenges that we'll have to deal with, as we look through this information. There's so much plastic, and it's lighter, and capturing it, recycling it can be particularly challenging. So when you look at weighing things, you need to think about the weight that is associated with plastic containers and the weight that organics have when it comes to moisture content and how heavy they actually are. PET bottles in the waste stream. We saw a lot of PET bottles being actively disposed of, which, a material that has value and readily recyclable, that's definitely something that we need to look into. As you would expect, metals and glass are way down from what they were back in that point in time. But when we dig deeper into data, we'll see if this is flatlined, because I know in Pennsylvania, people are still drinking their beer and wine out of glass bottles. So to look to see if that's stabilized over the upcoming years. There appears to be a significant drop in grass clippings. We hope that that's a good thing with backyard composting, other composting operations. We'll see how that works out. With regards to food waste as a percentage, it's definitely up. It's interesting to see the amount of uneaten food that is discarded, which you could categorize as potentially still being edible, and it being such a large percentage. A large percentage of the food was loose in there, not in containers. So we have to think about that material that's in containers and how we get that food out of when we depackage it to composting. What would that look like? So that's another thing to think about. Hard to divert materials, things that showed up in a prevalent way are things like diapers, sanitary hygiene products, and animal droppings in a big way. Those are things that showed up in a noticeable manner. Single stream recyclables, contamination has changed significantly. Depending on, in Pennsylvania, what you consider a single stream facility, we don't have a large number of them to serve 13 million people. They're very capital intensive projects, so they just don't pop up everywhere. That's why we need to recognize one size doesn't fit all. And the thing to look at single stream is the tremendous amount of cardboard that exists in the single stream facilities. I talked about a completion timeline. We expect to have, as you see in this chart, we expect to have the final draft report in June, and we expect to have the data available in July. When we do get the data, it will be made available to everyone for their use and whatever they want to do with it. Just a quick shout out. I'm not going to read through them, but you can see these are our partner facilities who work with us doing this project. As always, we want to let them know how much we appreciate them participating, and they will get the information too. So with that said, let me know if you have any questions. Again, we are committed to prioritizing the spending of our grant funds on what's in the waste stream to come going forward. Organics is a priority as we tie it to our greenhouse gas emissions. Can you, there's screen, so it's visible. Is everyone able to see the screen? I mean, I will share the slides now. I got through it. I just caught that.
I can see the screen here, Larry.
Okay,
I
great.
think we're okay.
Thanks. It's just important that we spend about $43 million a year, and we want to prioritize it on those things that will remain in the waste stream. We want to do things that are in concert with our climate initiatives, which you'll hear about in a little bit, and always looking forward and how to progress. And I will say, we measure success by economic and environmental benefits, and that's important to us, and we always say that. So with that said, that was a power update. You will have the information as soon as it's available to us in a final manner. And thank you for the opportunity to share this success story with you.
Thank you, Larry. We're all waiting patiently. So, any questions for Larry? There is one question here. Will the webinar be made available to review again? And I mentioned this earlier. Yes, we're recording this. It will be edited and put up on our website. So if there aren't any questions, we can move on to our next session. Bob and David, can you share your screen? There he goes. Okay, we have 3 presenters for this session. Our first presenter is David Altoff. He's the Director of the Energy Programs Office in the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. He's involved in supporting, designing, and implementing energy-focused programs to encourage the development and deployment of energy efficiency and alternative energy projects in Pennsylvania. The Energy Programs Office mission is to support activities which result in environmental improvements, including mitigating the effects of adapting to climate change. Dave, along with his staff persons, have spent the last several years developing forward-looking plans centered on positioning Pennsylvania to take full advantage of the clean energy economy. Recent projects include Clean Energy Program, Pennsylvania's Solar Future Plan, Pennsylvania's Electric Vehicle Roadmap, and an Energy Storage Assessment for Pennsylvania. These foundational plans have led to the creation of various follow-on stakeholder groups, including the Drive Electric Pennsylvania Coalition, the Pennsylvania Energy Storage Consortium, as well as the ability to successfully develop and implement incentive programs for targeting needed assistance to ensure success. During his career with DEP, David has led the development and deployment of $125 million of American Recovery and Reinvestment Stimulus Funds, the $100 million Pennsylvania Sunshine Program, and the $15 million Green Energy Revolving Loan Fund. Dave and his staff also lead the very popular Pennsylvania Alternative Fuels Incentive Grant Program, which distributes nearly $5 million annually to support alternative fuel use in the transportation sector in Pennsylvania. And the next speaker is, the following speaker is Robert Young. He's an energy program specialist with Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. Robert is an energy program specialist at DEP. He works to support initiatives in the areas of renewable energy and energy efficiency, particularly around the deployment of grid scale solar installations in order for Pennsylvania to achieve its 10% in-state solar generation goal by 2030. Additionally, he led the development of food waste to energy assessment that was released in December of 2021. This is what we're going to talk about today. He spent his early career as an analyst in the local government sector for the city of San Antonio, Texas, and the city of Alexandria, Virginia. He's a certified climate change professional through the Association of Climate Change Officers and received his BSc in civil engineering from Duke and his MP from the LBJ School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas. And we also have Larry Holley joining on this conversation too. So I'll let you guys take over.
All right, thanks, Wayne. I'm just doing a check here. You can hear me, correct?
Yep, and the screen looks good.
Awesome, thank you very much. And note to self, cut down on that intro bio a little bit. But I think what we're trying to say is that we're really busy. And the Energy Programs Office, my office, and some of the fine folks that work for me, including Mr. Young, who's on here, we're really busy doing things to assess and determine opportunities, looking forward opportunities for us to address clean energy opportunities in Pennsylvania, and also fight our climate impacts and climate change within Pennsylvania. So it's really going to be at the root of what we talk about today here with regards to this food waste to renewable energy assessment overview. As Wayne said, I'm joined here with Mr. Robert Young, Energy Program Specialist from my office, who really did a lot of the heavy lifting and the work on putting together this assessment. And of course, he'll wind up presenting really the guts of this presentation. But also, I'm joined by Mr. Larry Holley, who you know very well. And it was an effort right off the top, whereby when we were identifying from my office from a what's next on the clean energy spectrum of things to do within PA, that we identified working together with Larry's group, specifically on organics and food waste and its connection to recycling and how can we sort of work together in some of the efforts that his office has been involved with, combining it together with our sort of looking forward towards a clean energy economy, and how can we set the stage to do more in Pennsylvania related to using the tools at hand, using recycling, using materials that we handle every day, and how do we then turn that into opportunities within our communities to build a new economy around opportunity fuels and fighting climate change. So Robert, if you want to go to the next slide. So our office, the Energy Programs Office, while we focus on clean energy, we are also the climate program for Pennsylvania. So we operate the Climate Change Advisory Committee. Our responsibilities are to develop an annual climate inventory, so an inventory of greenhouse gas emissions, to develop a climate action plan once every 3 years, and also to develop a climate impacts assessment. The last iterations of those two were the 2021 climate action plan and the 2021 climate impacts assessment. And while we started this project, this food waste assessment project, prior to delivering this 2021 climate action plan update, the information that is in this food waste assessment is not necessarily present in the climate action plan because the data was not yet completed. There are some recommendations in the climate action plan around food waste, such as you see on your screen here, just generally the reduction of food waste as a strategy within the waste sector, and obviously the use of food waste as a feedstock for increased production and use of biogas. But it did not necessarily incorporate all of the findings from this assessment because it was not ready at that point in time. We knew it was something that we wanted to evaluate. We knew that we were working on it, but the timelines just did not sort of come out. But this provides us with a really unique opportunity at this point in time to sort of go around and talk about what's in our food waste assessment report and to lean forward towards what would be a 2024 climate action plan update, whereby we want to seize upon some of the success stories that we're having in Pennsylvania and some of the things that maybe we could do further and put those on board as policy suggestions. Next slide, Robert. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Larry for the next couple slides, and then we will all sort of join back together at the end for some Q&A. But I think it's great for Larry to give some of the background on how we sort of this came to be, and then we'll let Robert take over and really get into what the food waste assessment is telling us. Larry?
Thanks, Dave. As always, it's a pleasure to work with Dave's office and Robert, you know, where we become more effective as public servants in implementing our programs. The issue that we need to talk about was the food waste assessment in the past. It did not exist. We did a waste characterization study back in 2002, but as you saw, there weren't as many categories looked at. There are always high-level estimates, which you heard Melissa talk about, you know, making the inferences that they're down to Pennsylvania. But most importantly, it's best to have your own data because then you can make real policy decisions based on what's happening in the Commonwealth. As you heard, the waste composition study is well near complete and will be done soon and made available to you. This project that we're working on with Dave allows us to do what's very important to both of us, and that's look at positively impacting the climate as an agency and reducing the amount of waste we send to landfills or resource recovery facilities. That is very, very important. Impacts of food waste. USDA estimates that 31% of food produced for human consumption is not eaten. That's very important to note. We can do a better job of making sure that we have food security in the Commonwealth as a priority, reducing the amount of disposal, and then when we have to manage it other ways, making sure we're maximizing it through anaerobic digestion or other means, composting. EPA estimates are 24%. Just real quick on that, you saw our estimates are a little bit higher than that when it comes to food, and we'll be sharing those soon. Next. Just to talk about our desire to maximize diversion and provide food security. In 2020, we offered 145 grants for nearly $10 million to food shelters, banks, and anybody pretty much who had an established program to feed people. We feel that that's important in taking care of our fellow Pennsylvanians. We hope that our model be replicated by other states as a priority. It was interesting that some folks kicked back at us for spending recycling and waste reduction monies on this, when we thought it was a great example of how waste reduction plays into a greater society. The Department of Agriculture subsequently did their program for $11.4 million with 18 food banks, 67 counties. They bought some of the things that we did. What we did, Dave and I and Robert, we did a follow-up meeting with them to help coordinate our future efforts to make sure that they learn from our surveys and we learn from their surveys of how to better the program. Next. The report goals, we want to quantify industrial, commercial, and institutional food waste diversion and generation. The important thing about this is, and you'll hear Dave and Robert say later, is, we could only look at a segment of it. We did not delve into the residential arena, which is something to be determined, and we'll have a good idea on some generation and waste disposal from the waste characterization study, but it's important. We looked at an inventory of the anaerobic digestion and composting facilities and the capacity that they have, because one thing that you need to do is to maximize your existing capacity. You need to understand what that capacity was. We had never done that before. We had to estimate the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and biogas generation resulting from the current level of diversion. Opportunities. We're looking for opportunities to be better. Identify the best management practices for existing composting and AD facilities to encourage additional diversion. What could they do? And you'll hear Robert talk about it in detail. What could they do to change their process to allow them to consume more food? Waste. And this one is particularly interested, and we only bring this up because EPA's food waste hierarchy is slightly different than our waste hierarchy. You're all familiar with both. Where I will bring attention to is when you look at, on our waste hierarchy, it's recycling, resource recovery, landfilling. So on theirs, it has energy above composting. The subtle difference between ours is we have composting above energy recovery or energy production. The good thing to note is they both work in harmony, and the bottom line is we want to maximize diversion and other uses before we dispose of, landfill, or incinerate anything. So that's it. Oh, I guess this one's mine too. I'm sorry. I talked a little bit about this, is where the opportunity is and what we looked at as a part of this study. And you'll look at that diversion from the commercial sector in particular, and the small percentage that goes to food banks. There's opportunities there for us to be better there and do it. We did not get into residential, as I said, but there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity in the commercial and industrial sector to get those facilities generating food waste and those facilities that with the ability to consume it connected. And mapping out where they are is a critical part of how we get better and how we maximize this effort. And I will kick it back to Dave.
Thanks, Larry. And an additional piece to this is that when we did this assessment and did a number of surveys, Robert will talk about them as well, is that we own all the data now for this. And so, and it's been provided to us in a GIS format for further analysis. And as Larry says, we're not done here, right? This is really just the beginning piece of this. And we need to build off of the information that we have. So this is all part of our assessment report, which we encourage you to go take a look at and understand that we have the data and we want to build further on the data. Additionally, we thought it was really important to place into this assessment some case studies, because it's not as if we're starting from scratch. It's not as if this is a brand new opportunity to Pennsylvania. We have some folks out there who we've provided some funding to in the past. Some people we funded, some people we have not, who are really doing some really great great things with regards to food waste. And so we wanted to identify those within the report as a best practice, something to follow along with, and also create some confidence that, you know, we can build this out, right? It's already been built up to some degree. We know that we can be successful, but it can be further built out. And so there's some really good case studies for folks to refer to within this assessment. And the purpose is to show that to some degree, we've already forged ahead on this, and now we can really expand and do more in the sector. Over to you, Robert.
All right, thanks, Dave. So I'll just jump in, kind of give an overview of the meat of the assessment. We'll provide a link at the end of this presentation, and it will be available with the meeting materials as well that Bob and Wayne will put up. But so breaking it up, as Larry kind of talked about the report outcomes, on the front end, we want to look at food waste generation, and calling back, it's great to actually follow Melissa when giving this presentation, because she set the stage and provided a lot more context than we generally have when giving an overview on this. But you know, as Dave and Larry were just mentioning, the scope of this assessment was just focused on industrial, commercial, and institutional, completely recognizing that agricultural and residential sources do contribute to food waste in landfills and other diversion pathways. But for the sakes of the scope of this assessment, we focused on those three sectors, and you can see on the screen there, drilling down a little bit more what they mean. Looking at the upper right-hand corner there, you're going to see us refer a lot of times to this generation threshold of 52 tons per year. And looking at best practices from other states where different policies have been accepted and just general economic theory, it seems to be that's the threshold where diversion practices become economically viable for these food waste generators to go through the process of more intensive source separation. So sometimes the data will be presented in the absolute factor of food waste generation from the industrial, commercial, and institutional sectors. But a lot of times when we're talking about recommendations and a little bit more deeper analysis, we'll be talking about that 52 tons per year. And I'll be able to put that into context in the next couple of slides, but want to call that out. And then in the bottom right there, when we're talking about food waste types, again, this goes back to what Melissa was saying, the idea of food loss versus waste. So we're focusing on the waste, not the loss from manufacturing processes or delivery practices. We're focusing on, the byproducts from manufacturing processes, the expired and unsold food from retail stores, the table scraps, the plate waste. But it's important to note also that outside the scope was the waste generated food banks. As you saw on that pathways chart that Larry talked to, we didn't want to double count some of that 7% that's already going to food banks, and then what's lost from there might re-enter the system again. And also didn't focus on the fogs, the fats, oils, and greases, because there's already a robust market for the reuse and economic opportunities associated with those types of waste. So again, just to give you an idea of the scope of what's in and outside of the assessment parameters. So the next thing we did was, looking at trying to get a feel for what is the food waste generation across the Commonwealth. So on the right-hand side there, we used we didn't create any of these factors using it from, studies Massachusetts has done. I think a lot of their information was based off work that was done in California earlier. There's a lot of good research and accepted figures to use proxies for food waste generation at different types of facilities. Whether it's, for supermarkets, using employees, or for schools looking at enrollment reports. So using these types of figures to come up with, this is a little bit of an oxymoron, but more precise estimates, building upon the work that EPA had already done with similar types of analyses, but drilling down a little bit more specific. So aligning data and applying these factors to come up with these estimates across the Commonwealth. So we actually identified over 50,000 or 52,000 individual data points for generators that fit in these ICI categories, and applied these factors with some data cleanup. And our consultant did a great job on applying different types of data management and review. And we feel that when you roll this up at a county level and definitely at the statewide level, it's excellent planning data, these estimates. It might not be, at the specific individual facility level that precise, but for planning purposes, it gives us a good snapshot of the world of food waste generation across the Commonwealth. And as Dave mentioned, being able to apply this into GIS analysis moving forward to be able to get a snapshot of the kind of the feedstock potential in specific geographic areas could be a benefit in future planning activities. So what we found when we applied all these generation factors across those 52,000 data points is that there's about 2.7 million tons of food waste meeting the criteria we used, being generated across the Commonwealth. But when you apply that screening for those facilities generating more than 52 tons per year at a specific location, you filter out a lot of the establishments. As you can see, the number of establishments are the orange bars, where the waste being generated are the blue bars on this graph. So you're filtering out a lot of the facilities and not losing a lot of the quantity of waste being generated. So you can see, in that low-hanging fruit, or those are, the first types of facilities you really want to target when applying some of the strategies for food waste reduction. You can really lower the universe and the number of individual facilities being managed. So throughout the rest of the study, we'll probably be usually referring to the 2 million tons per year when talking about those facilities generating 52 tons or more. So just to follow up on that last graph, 14% of the number of establishments exceed that 52 tons per year, but it's actually over 73% that 2 million of the 2.7 million tons being generated. And most of those are coming from food manufacturers, wholesale and retailers, and restaurants and food services. So those are the main categories really to look at when coming up with strategies. And actually the 370 highest generating establishments, most of which are manufacturers and processors, are generating over 46% of the 2 million tons. And just a last summary here, this is kind of a heat map showing at the county level the amount of waste being generated. No surprises here. This really tracks the population density, with the outlier being Allegheny County, where there's a high percentage of food manufacturing still going on, but no outliers when looking at it at this level for the most part, other than Allegheny County. So moving into the processor side. So as I mentioned before, when we're looking at the generation side, that was based on a lot of estimates based off, data available, such as enrollment reports or employment reports, things like that. On the processing side, we use more direct surveying methods, reaching out to individual operators of the facilities of anaerobic digesters and compost sites. So first, looking at anaerobic digesters, the facilities that are currently processing food waste, as you can see, the three main categories are on-farm facilities, wastewater treatment plants, and some standalone facilities directly engaging in food waste. So this isn't the whole world of anaerobic digestion across the Commonwealth. These are the facilities that, through reviewing permit data, through other surveying methods, that were identified that currently process food waste. So that the total number of those facilities is 26. And as I mentioned, we did some direct surveying, was able to get response from about 16, which is pretty good percentage. Again, a lot of the surveying was going on during the heights of COVID in 2020. And we were able to apply, for the sites that weren't able to respond to the survey, apply the data there. But what we're finding is the throughput for food waste in terms of tons per year, and there's a lot of analysis because a lot of that was in liquid form and volumetric, but trying to find a standard for reporting throughout the assessment, coming out to about 107,000 tons per year of throughput at anaerobic digestion facilities of food waste. So that's about 5.4% of that 2 million tons or so. We also have figures there through the analysis for biogas generation, greenhouse gas emissions reductions, but we'll talk about that a little bit later in this presentation. On the composting side, again, here's the the map of those facilities, the composting facilities that accept food waste. Again, not all composting facilities across the Commonwealth. As you can see, it pretty much tracks with a lot with agricultural areas in the state, and did the same sort of analysis through surveys for the composting facilities. Again, great responses. About 20 to 25 facilities provided information, and we're finding throughput of about 38,000 tons per year, which is about 2% of that total food waste generation from these facilities of establishments generating more than 52 tons per year. And, for composting facilities able through some EPA modeling to develop greenhouse gas emission reduction estimates. Obviously, there's not biogas generation at compost facilities. So looking at the throughput at these facilities, so the 3 bars on the left are the AD facilities, on the right is composting. And through that survey data, what's in blue on the bottom of each of those bars is the current throughput. What's in green gives an idea of additional capacity of these facilities based on the surveying, based on the facility operators' understanding of their capacity and capability. So this gave us a good idea of, without any additional capital investments, what could be achieved through additional throughput of food waste, just through some operational changes. But as part of the survey as well, we really wanted to gain an understanding of what was preventing the additional capacity being used here. So from the AD facilities, a lot of times, there's just not a market for that additional biogas if they're not pipeline connected. The cost to get that gas to market, if it exceeds their on-site generation use, really doesn't work. A lot of times, just the tipping fees compared to landfill tipping fees, or just the cleanliness of the feedstock was a major concern. The amount of effort to ensure, again, that the feedstock's not contaminated, or that it aligns with the chemistry properties of the current AD reactions. So those were some of the barriers. We go in a little bit more depth in the study, the assessment about those. On the composting side, a lot of the barriers to additional capacity were on the permitting side, limits on land being used. So again, those issues were identified and documented in the assessment for consideration for future modifications to permitting practices. Another thing we looked at were those anaerobic digestion facilities not currently processing food waste. So there's about 83 of those facilities. Got feedback from about 28, and able to provide high-level analyses using the EPA COEAT modeling software. And after some analysis, about 7 of those facilities potentially have the capacity to incorporate food waste into their existing digestion practices. A lot of times the barriers might be economic, or there might be physical constraints. But for those 7 facilities or so, the average capital improvements would be about $3 million to those individual facilities. You can see on the right the different types of capital costs, whether it's expanding digestion, reactor capacity, or depackaging equipment, or just those are the types of improvements that would be required at these different facilities. So, with that type of investment, $20 million or so, we might see an additional 77,000 tons of food waste throughput on the processing capacity per year. So this just kind of sums up the previous couple slides, the throughput from those anaerobic digestion facilities currently processing food waste, and their capacity if they were using all of their available capacity, the compost facilities, and then the AD facilities not currently processing food waste. So just to kind of give a scope of the processing capability out there currently across the Commonwealth. So as I mentioned, kind of just revisiting some of the environmental impacts, the greenhouse gas emission reductions, and the biogas generation. So we did not set any sort of planning targets associated with this assessment. So what this chart here shows over time, the blue line is the as-is scenario where we are processing food waste, diverting food waste at the current rate through those existing facilities, and the greenhouse gas, the cumulative reduction of greenhouse gas emission reductions. The orange line kind of shows, if we were able to utilize that existing capacity at AD and compost facilities, the additional reductions in greenhouse gas emissions we'd be able to see over time. That does not include those that would require additional capital investments. And the green line was just for planning purposes to kind of draw a line in the sand. What if we had additional diversions of 1% year over year of food waste from these current levels, what would that look like in terms of impact on greenhouse gas reduction goals? So again, the no official policy coming out of this, but just for conversation and scenario planning, that green line kind of helps to visualize and work through those questions. Kind of summing up again here, the blue column there is the current state. We're seeing 145,000 tons of throughput, which is about 7% of the total ICI waste being generated. That's the greenhouse, about 100,000 million metric tons of greenhouse gas reductions per year in the biogas generation. And you can see on those other two scenarios how they would expand over time. To put those greenhouse gas emission reductions in terms of just the solid waste management sector, which contributes 2.5 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 equivalents to the greenhouse gas inventory in Pennsylvania. The current diversion is about 4% of that total impact in the solid waste sector. The unused capacity could get another 3%, and that 35% diversion goal is that 1% year over year through 2048 or so. Additional 16% in avoided emissions. So this kind of just ties in some of the greenhouse gas planning impacts, and these are obviously included in more detail in the full assessment report. So that kind of sums up the highlights of the assessment. I'll bring Dave and Larry back in to kind of sum this up and talk about some of the recommendations and next steps.
You want to kick it off, Larry?
Sure. As you heard, we talked about our food recovery infrastructure grant and that $9 million we spent. We expect in fiscal year 2022 that we'll offer that program again because it was a success and it definitely improved food security and eliminated waste going to landfills. We are working from new positions within the waste program. We hope to reinstitute a Commonwealth-wide organic management coordinator to help coordinate these efforts, like the one Dave and I and Robert got there. There's other programs that we could work with too from the water program, but if somebody's main function is doing that, that will definitely make a big difference.
And then on top of that, there's obvious opportunities going forward from the Energy Programs Office standpoint with bipartisan infrastructure law and emphasis on the clean energy economy. We would like to find ways to potentially help support some of the build out of this existing infrastructure and or new infrastructure for food waste to energy. And once again, I want to reemphasize something that Larry just said is that we are not specifically looking at this as to how to get food into digesters or how to get food into composting facilities. We want to make sure that we are focusing in on those folks who are handling this food waste, that there's really nowhere else for it to go, and trying to avoid it going into the landfill. So feeding people, making sure that food goes to the right place, and that ultimately these are food spoils or food waste that can not necessarily be used for other purposes. Then how do we make sure that we are utilizing all of our current capacity, and we are supporting those folks who are executing those types of projects in Pennsylvania for development of alternative fuels, and those alternative fuels which help to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We know that 85% of all of our greenhouse gas emissions really comes from energy acquisition, transmission, and use. And so if we're able to utilize some of these opportunity fuels in communities and be able to replace some of those carbon-based fuels with our food waste, that's a win-win proposition. So much so that we have a Green Gov office as a part of the Pennsylvania state government, and they have sustainability mission across all types of activities in the Commonwealth, and recycling being one of them. And they are looking as well at opportunities for Commonwealth agency facilities to lead by example by doing a better job of identifying food waste opportunities and finding an appropriate disposition of those food waste such that it supports our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. Next slide. And so with that, we'll want to turn it back to you guys for some Q&A. I'm sure you have some questions. I just wanted to finally say that it's been a real pleasure working with Larry Holley and his group. We know that recycling is something that everybody identifies with as a piece of being an environmentalist, as something good that you're doing for the environment. We think food definitely has a role to play there. We are always looking for opportunities in everybody's home or in everybody's communities to do things that feel like you're lending a shoulder to the wheel related to combating climate change. We think that the combination of particularly food waste, something that everybody deals with every day, that they handle every day, and recycling, a concept that folks really can identify with. And there's been plenty of progress in that area over the years. We can really combine these two things together, and this can be one of the items whereby, as we're combating this on all fronts, it's an easy one to do. We just need to be able to make sure that we are supporting the infrastructure necessary to accept, handle, and then turn this food waste opportunity into alternative fuels that are helping to combat our climate crisis. So thank you.
Thank you, David. One of the questions was, is this study available? And I think the link is there on the Q&A slide. Also, if somebody wants to cut and paste that into the chat, they can get it that way. And also, we'll have it on our resources page. So we're taking some questions here. We do have some time. Here's a question. How did you come up with the 21% ag and the 37% food waste generation for the sectors outside the study scope?
So that figure, so obviously there's multiple data sources and a lot of people looking at that. That was using information from ReFed, the nonprofit that's looking at this at the national level. They had provided some state-specific estimates. So these figures here in the slide that we're showing again were based on some ReFed data where this was based off EPA estimates. So again, more for conversation than specific planning purposes. And that's why we went in and did the assessment to get a better idea, at least with these sectors, what we were seeing specifically in Pennsylvania to build upon those estimates at the national level.
Yeah, thank you, Nora. Nora Goldstein from Biocycle just posted that link. She actually had it in one of her posts. So is there any data on jobs from this study?
So we didn't specifically look at any sort of economic development impacts or job creation impacts when kind of mapping out some of the scenarios or looking at the capital investments. There's a little higher level than that. The only place where jobs came in were, using job figures to come up with some of the estimates for food waste generation for groups like the supermarkets or the restaurants, but there was no component of job creation associated with this assessment.
Okay, thank you. This is for Robert. Can you say anything about the barriers facing on-farm sites versus other sites?
I'm trying to think in these. I don't think we call out when talking about the barriers. There's a discussion of the barriers in the assessment itself. I don't think we categorize them by the different challenges for the on-farm digesters versus the wastewater treatment or the standalone facilities. I think that's a great question, and I think the different sectors here would face different challenges, especially around transportation, around depackaging, around permit requirements. I think there is some discussion of those kinds of figures, some of those kinds of constraints in the assessment, but I don't think we went too in depth in breaking down specific challenges for these different types of digesters.
Larry, you may be able to lean into that one a little bit, because I think that question connects back to permitting and an organics coordinator, and we understand that there are some, in order to sort of ramp up in this area, there needs to be more attention paid on siting and appropriately doing so with regards to a waste product that obviously has some environmental detriment associated with it if not handled properly.
Yeah, I think you said that pretty well. Just the overall coordination of these initiatives is a priority for the agency in helping make sure that we take into account all those environmental impacts when we make these decisions. It is good. I think you did a good job there, Dave.
Okay. There's a comment, great work on the food waste assessment, very useful document. Do you have any sense on the timeline for rolling out infrastructure grants for the processors in Pennsylvania?
Not at this point in time. It's something, understand that it's certainly an arrow in our quiver with regards to things that we would like to do. There's lots of folks who want to do certain things, and I'm not aware that there's specific energy funding directly towards organics or organics processors. So we're going to have to try to find a way relative to some of our gap filling opportunities to do that. But certainly, this is some of the reason why we put this report together, is that it creates the foundation for us to point to. This is an important item for Pennsylvania. This is something that we should and need to be funding. And here are what the benefits are, both from clean energy economy, greenhouse gas emission reduction. And as somebody pointed out here, there is a jobs component to this, but it's not something that we did an assessment of with this report, but it could be something that we follow on with from the standpoint of supporting opportunities to use some of those funds coming from the federal government.
Thank you. Here's a long one from Brenda. Any next steps to reduce contamination to enhance end product quality as well as support a distributed and decentralized infrastructure? Parentheses, that, for example, includes farms, question mark. One trend in the Northeast is building of depackaging systems in front of industrial AD compost sites, which inadvertently has encouraged commingling of packaged versus non-packaged wasted food. I know farmers that used to receive food scraps from supermarkets and other generators, but are now being bypassed for large-scale sites with depackagers. And I just want to comment quick that I'm going to address a little bit of that on depackaging in my session later on. And there's also another question on permitting, so I'll wait to discuss that in my talk.
I'll jump in real quick on that issue of depackaging and versus centralized depackaging. There is a discussion in the assessment and the recommendations looking at, is some sort of centralized depackaging facility before it gets to the farms or other AD facilities could be a benefit. That's a model that is being rolled out in some other states. So there's a treatment on that in the assessment report to discuss that specific question.
Okay, well, I think we're going to end there with this session. Thank you, folks, for that great session and information. So, Corey Ann, you can get your slide deck up while I introduce you. So our next presenter is Corey Ann Mansell. She's the Client Services Strategist for the Center of Ecotechnology. Corey supports CET's wasted food solutions efforts by leading stakeholder engagement processes and providing on-site technical assistance to businesses and institutions. She currently serves as chair for the Outreach Committee for the Young Professionals of the U.S. Composting Committee, and she's chair for the Education and Outreach Committee for the New Jersey Composting Council chapter. She has a BS degree in environmental policy and a BA in planning and public policy from Rutgers. And she has a certificate in sustainable business from the McIntyre Business Institute. Thanks for patiently waiting, Corey Ann. You're up.
Great. Good morning, or almost good afternoon. Can you see my slides all right?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, thank you. So again, thanks for inviting me to speak this morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Corey Ann Mansell, the Client Services Strategist at the Center for Ecotechnology. Make sure I can advance. So briefly, I'll note that the Center for Ecotechnology, or CET, is a nonprofit that helps people and businesses save energy and reduce waste. For over 40 years, we've been helping businesses and institutions implement programs on the ground while also contributing and implementing effective public policy on these efforts. And so one way we achieve this is through our Wasted Food Solutions program and initiatives. And our objective is really to accelerate the food waste marketplace and not to duplicate efforts, but work with local partners and offer train-the-trainer opportunities when applicable. We also provide direct waste assistance to businesses and institutions, and this can include a on-site or virtual appointment where we then develop a customized recommendation report that includes solutions to prevent, rescue, or otherwise divert material from the trash. Informally, I consider us a matchmaker between those that have surplus food or recyclables to those that can handle it in more beneficial avenues. And then this overall background really helped CET from that boots on the ground perspective, with matching it with the reality of policy implementation. So we understand the levers that can be applied to really make impactful routes towards diversion. Today, I will be running through one of the resources that we recently created with support from Natural Resource Defense Council in partnership with Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic and Biocycle. And we conducted a gap analysis and policy inventory for states in the 3 regions noted here. And each of the states listed here does have an NRDC, Natural Resource Defense Council, Food Matters City. So that was the focus area. Our partners, Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic, they work with their students to use legal and policy tools to address health, environment, and economic impacts of our food system, really understanding where policy can be applied to reduce waste, increase healthy, wholesome food, and increase access to this food as well. And so we were grateful for their legal and policy expertise here. And then we also worked with Biocycle, which is the Organics Recycling Authority, and also a print publication that has a website, and they contributed to this resource really as a leading publication on the processing and management of food scraps. So together, our team developed a food waste policy gap analysis and inventory for Mid-Atlantic, Southeast, and Great Lakes region. And this included analysis of Pennsylvania's policies, which I will be walking through today. For context, I did want to walk through the layout of the guide. So these reports were developed to provide a comprehensive overview of each covered state's respective policy landscape and really how it helps or hinders efforts to reduce wasted food. The introduction and the policy gap analysis approach and applications section offers a background of these policies as well as an introduction on how to use this guide. It includes the rationale for the rubric that defines no policy, weak, moderate, and strong policy ratings for each category. It also highlights examples of the policies in various categories that illustrate the variety of potential options. So when appropriate, we fed in examples that might be out of the region to bring in best practices or unique approaches that could be applied. The gap analysis is an area where it's identifying policy opportunities to further food waste reduction efforts. This applies the approach for each respective state and provides that indication of how the policy is rated based on the rubric that I described. So this section highlights where there are particularly strong policies that can be leveraged by a city, as well as advocacy opportunities where policies may be weak or non-existent. The policy inventory sections offers a more comprehensive overview of the policies that we were reviewing, as well as executive orders, goals, targets, or programs that exist across the 10 categories that we assessed. And this can be a great reference for understanding what is currently happening and also the policies that were in place when we did this analysis, understanding that it was released in August of 2021. Even within that time span of then and now, we know that there's a lot of other momentum and policies, programs, et cetera, that have been advocated for. So as I mentioned, we assessed 10 policy categories on aspects across the EPA food recovery hierarchy. To develop this policy inventory, we conducted a review of the current policies in each of these categories and provided a summary of the existing legislation. Then, of course, to fill in the gaps and also gain some additional insights, we conducted interviews to learn more and to incorporate that expertise in as well. And I do want to quickly thank those in the room today that may have offered their guidance here. For an example of what you might find in a category, for example, the plans targeting solid waste section may include items such as solid waste master plans, zero waste plans, and other initiatives that are within that bucket. I know this can be a lot of text, but it is an important slide to show. This is the rubric, if you will. So as noted, content from the policy inventories was analyzed and compared against this rubric to develop a consistent approach that we applied across each region and across each state. It's important to also recognize that the solutions need to be place-based and take into consideration the needs of the organizations and of the state or city. So for example, waste bans or organics recycling laws might not be the right fit for every state in this current climate, but it is considered a best practice. So it is included as a strategy to assess, and it is noted, as a strong policy. And with that, recommendations can be applied across the rubric. So it's okay if a state doesn't have a strong policy in place. We can either get there or we can focus on other areas. And we also acknowledge that many of these policies or programs need some ramp up time. So for example, an organics recycling law, it's not as though necessarily we're saying tomorrow it needs to be enacted, because there can be additional steps that pave the way for that, either by looking at these other policies or in advance of that, setting out educational programs, technical assistance that I'll detail further along the way. And ways to use the guide. So thinking about how to use it, it does provide that broad listing of policies across the various categories. And so that's a stepping stone of understanding what exists currently, looking at where there are gaps and where we can be focusing some of our areas of where there's areas of opportunity. And then also looking at what other states have in place and feeding that in as examples, as inspiration, or just as reference point. So now that we have a general framework of these reports, I wanted to take a look at some of the highlights specific to Pennsylvania. As I noted earlier, and I'm sure as everyone can understand, we released this in August of 2021. And as we heard today, Pennsylvania is making great headway in some of these policy activities. So I'll try and note that as much as possible when I'm running through the presentation today, but forgive me if there's certain aspects that have gained momentum since the time of this release. So first and foremost, organics disposal bans and recycling laws. These are policies that are designed to achieve food waste reduction, including prevention, donation, as well as other strategies across the food waste management hierarchy. And at this time, Pennsylvania has no such policy. So thus, the policy recommendations included here might reference enacting an organic waste ban or mandatory organics recycling law for all commercial generators, or introducing a solid waste disposal tip fee that would incentivize waste diversion while generating a revenue stream to fund food waste prevention or diversion programs. thinking about how we did this study for states, but it was in partnership with NRDC and the Food Matters cities. We also do know areas where cities or counties may be able to enact their own organic waste bans or food waste recycling laws to establish incentive programs for these activities. So we can use that state perspective as a model, but then see where it could be applied in your own local jurisdiction. So organics processing infrastructure and permitting. So strong processing infrastructure policies are defined as ones that actively facilitate the development and permitting of organic waste processing facilities, including both commercial scale composting and anaerobic digestion facilities and small scale composting operations, and are also in sync with best practices for organics processing. As an example, tiered regulations are one strategy, and of the 12 states that we conducted an inventory for, 7 of those have tiered regulation for food waste composting. 4 of them do not, and the District of Columbia does not compost or have AD regulations. Regulation of anaerobic digestion facilities receiving food scraps also can vary by states. And for example, Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, for example, has a permit for co-digestion on dairy farms. However, oversight of co-digestion at wastewater treatment plants is done by the Waste and Waste Division. And here we rank Pennsylvania's policy here as moderate, as there is a regulatory tier that includes source separated food waste and created multiple permitting pathways for composting food waste, such as those on site on farms. And but it does not have an exemption from permitting for small scale and or community composting operations. And then the permit requirements are subject to interpretation by district offices that approve permit applications. And Pennsylvania does not have a separate permitting pathway in solid waste regulations for anaerobic digestion of source separated food waste. I won't spend too much time here because I know we have an upcoming presentation that will shed some more light on this permitting perspective, but I did want to transition to the policy recommendations that we've included when looking at the strong policies. So one is ensuring that the permitting requirements are kept up to date with best practices for composting, consistency into the permit approval process to minimize that variation in interpretation of applicability and the requirements by district offices that can be quite cumbersome and deter folks from establishing sites. Then creating an exemption for small scale composting of food waste with a simplified registration process, thinking about that same undertaking for permitting and registration. Then ensuring that urban composting facilities are considered and how those permitting requirements can be adapted as needed. And it's really exciting that in Philadelphia, there are some urban composting sites that are in development. Developing a separate permitting pathway for anaerobic digestion of source separated food waste. That also includes, when applicable, requirements that are similar to those that are imposed on composting of source separated food scraps. And then as we learned earlier or heard earlier from US Composting Council, also that bolstering the market for finished compost by looking at the procurement requirements for commercial developers and or government agencies. So now we'll segue to thinking about that food recovery tier or food donation tier. Date labels are a major driver of food waste and can be an obstacle to food donation. So no current federal system is regulating the use of date labels such as sell by or use by. However, in late of 2021, there was a bipartisan bill that was introduced called the Food Date Label Standardization Act. And with that bipartisan bill, there will be some exciting momentum and simplification or clarity around date state labeling laws. And without federal guidelines, states individually decide whether and how to regulate date labels, which leads to manufacturers' broad discretion over how dates on foods and labels are selected and applied. And most date labels actually reflect quality and taste rather than safety. Yet many businesses, individuals, I know sometimes I've fell upon this, and state regulators frequently misunderstand those dates to be indicators of food safety, which ultimately leads to that food waste. And if we standardize these date labels, it's cost effective and can be highly impactful, especially when we're pairing that with consumer education campaigns on the meaning of these date labels. So in the act that the federal bill is not passed, their state level standardization can follow the Food Date Label Standardization Act, which includes dual date labeling scheme, which clear distinction between the safety-based, which is used by, and quality-based labels, which is more of the best if used by. And then express the permission and ability to donate food past the quality-based date, and then also looking at consumer education campaigns to support this best practice. So Pennsylvania has a moderate policy where date labels are required for milk and shellfish, but there's no definition between quality-based and safety-based dates. And I'll also note that the state does not prohibit or limit the sale of or donation of food past its labeled date, potentially because it is acknowledging that it's quality-based rather than it's safety-based. So policy recommendations that I already discussed and highlighted earlier of looking at those education campaigns, looking at establishing guidelines around the quality-based versus in tandem with the safety-based date labelings. In addition, protection from liability for food donation can also help spur additional food rescue activity. So the federal Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act offers this federal protection for liability. However, states such as New Jersey and Ohio have actually gone above and beyond by offering additional protections. And this means can include protection for direct donations from donors to recipients, explicitly providing liability protection for food donated past that quality-based date label that I was mentioning earlier, and then clarifying the guidance to be explicit about liability protections for donations that can include a low price by distributing nonprofits. So understanding that food donation can be a costly endeavor for food rescue organizations. There's a lot of people power behind it, and so maybe there's opportunities to sell it at a more discounted price, in addition to other avenues. Since this report was developed, the Senators Toomey and Blumenthal actually introduced the Food Donation Improvement Act of 2021. And this would extend liability protections to food donors when food is provided directly to a person in need rather than a nonprofit, as well as when food is given at a deeply reduced cost. And it would also clarify labeling standards for donated food to make items eligible for liability protections. At this time, at the time of this report, we did note this as an area of weak policy for Pennsylvania, as the state does not have additional liability protections for donors and distributors of food offered for free, and there is a presumption of good faith. However, liability protections do not cover donations directly to needy individuals or donations that are supplied at a small fee. There was a recently introduced bill that would add this direct permission to distribute food that is past a quality-based date label. I also wanted to note, for more information about this, Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic developed state-specific legal fact sheets on this topic, including date labeling laws, tax incentives, and feeding food scraps to animals. And these are a great resource when reflecting on some of these brief points that I mentioned today, and then also when talking with businesses who may have interest or hesitations around donating food. And the clinic has created state-specific fact sheets for Pennsylvania. Then there's also tax incentives for food rescue. As I noted earlier, donating food can be expensive because it does require additional money to harvest, package, store, and transport this safe, edible food. And there is a federal tax incentive, but certain businesses are struggling to utilize it. So state taxes are a strong option. And a few states do offer this type of tax incentives to farms to encourage donation. The strongest policies will fully offset the costs associated with this food donation, including transportation, and are offered to businesses aside from farms. Pennsylvania has a moderate policy where the state offers a state tax credit for donating food and does not necessarily appear to limit who may qualify. However, our interviews found that the tax benefit is potentially insufficient to offset the costs associated with the donation. I did want to highlight, again, thinking about how we were developing these state-specific gap analysis and landscape reviews with the Food Matters cities in mind. And so I wanted to note that Philadelphia has a sustainability, which is a Food Matters city, has a sustainable business tax incentive, which offers businesses who participate in sustainability efforts, such as food donation, a tax credit of up to $4,000. So that's where the states and cities can work in tandem, and this analysis can provide a jumping off point for ideas and how cities or states can be working together or advocate for policies on their own pathway. Food safety for share tables. So share tables in schools also promote food rescue efforts and teach our students about food waste and the potential for food rescue. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, provides guidance on establishing share tables in schools. And a strong policy is one where a state goes above and beyond this guidance by encouraging share tables and developing state-specific guidelines or instructions about food safety as it relates to share tables and the donation of safe edible food. In general, with all of these topic areas that I mentioned, the lack of clarity about food safety for food donation discourages donation and leads to food waste. So how can we be looking at clarifying and guiding those to feel as safe and confident about their programs that they're looking at? We noted that Pennsylvania has a weak policy, just because that they do allow share tables, but doesn't provide additional state-specific resources or guidance on the food safety of them or for them. And there's an opportunity to look further. And so our policy recommendations may include regulations that explicitly state what foods can be donated, statewide uniformity among regulations that apply to donated food, clarifying guidance on food safety for food donation to support potential food donors, and the trainings for local health inspectors on safe food donation best practices. Food systems, plans, goals, and targets. So statewide food system plans where goals and targets are given the support of state infrastructure will have a much broader impact than regional or local food system plans. So any plan that actively considers food waste reduction and sets clear targets to reduce food loss and waste demonstrates a clear commitment to improving our food systems. We do note that Pennsylvania has a moderate policy and that the governor's food security partnership has developed a plan outlined in Setting the Table, a blueprint for hunger-free Pennsylvania that addresses food systems, but it doesn't have additional requirements or infrastructure to comply with these recommendations. So it's an outline, but we feel as though it could be strengthened. This category looks at ways to address climate change, and we acknowledge that there's a role that food waste plays in greenhouse gas emissions. And at the time of the study, we designated this category as a weak policy. However, as we just heard, Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection is supporting the goals of the 2021 Pennsylvania Climate Action Plan by studying food waste generation and processing, which is really exciting. But at the time of this report, we found that there was not a clear climate plan with emission goals directly to food waste, at the time of developing this study. And in absence of statewide policies, local municipalities can be looking at their own legislation and really bridging that gap. When we're thinking about climate action goals, we found that many do not mention food waste, even though there's such a deep connection there. They might be reliant on the energy side, but as we know, and as we heard today, there's also energy opportunities within food waste, as well as just overall greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So here I have plans targeting solid waste. And so again, at the time, and we release this, there was no solid waste management plan at the state level. However, I also wanted to, this is an important note in context of the presentation we heard earlier about the waste characterization study. It's an exciting study to have on hand because it does set that stage and that platform for where we're at now and where we can be setting our goals to within a solid waste management plan, as they do set targets and frameworks for achieving overall materials management and waste diversion goals. And there are a variety of levers and mechanisms that can support infrastructure for solutions to wasted food, which can move communities closer to being ready to address or accept some of these other solutions in other policy areas. And so while some states offer grants that may be applied to food waste, explicitly providing funding for food waste loss and food waste and loss, as well as promoting food rescue, it can provide that momentum and that infrastructure development within the marketplace to get activities going and really think about how we can build a robust, strong marketplace. Pennsylvania has moderate policy. There were a lot of grants that were just mentioned, so I almost want to change this to strong, seeing where we're going next and how it's really exciting. One of the recommendations was to reinstitute the Food Recovery Infrastructure Grant, as well as others. So even since last year, we can see that there's a lot of exciting progress, and I'm really excited to keep plugged into Pennsylvania's next steps and see how our organization, as well as the team that produced this report, can be contributing to this momentum and be looking to where we can go next when thinking about, again, that food waste marketplace across the EPA food recovery hierarchy. And finally, thank you. Thank you for your participation in the summit today, and I really appreciate this time that we spent on this document. I'll speak for our organization, Natural Resource Defense Council, Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic, and Biocycle, to note how we really encourage states and cities to utilize this document as a reference point, earmarking areas where there might be the biggest opportunities for you, or where you can seek inspiration from others. And we'd be also happy to facilitate connections if you're really interested in learning more about aspects of the document. So again, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Carrie Ann. All right, we're going to talk about some permits in Pennsylvania. This does focus on Pennsylvania alone. So anybody on the call that already holds a permit in Pennsylvania for composting, particularly food waste, or if there's anybody out there looking to get into the composting business or add food waste to one of your feedstocks, this is a good session. So I'm going to focus on food scraps, composting, and anaerobic digestion, particularly on four permits that are out there now. They're the general permits that address the composting and anaerobic digestion of food waste. And I'm going to talk about how those permits fit into the hierarchy of the PADP permit system. There are, I think, 3 of these permits are set to expire this year. So I just want to talk a little bit about that. And then some exciting stuff about recent and proposed amendments to some of these permits, which I think may be a game changer in Pennsylvania. So the hierarchy is in Pennsylvania it's tiered, like Corianne mentioned. There's exempt operations, mostly are agriculture. If you have food processing waste, there's an agricultural exemption if that's applied on agricultural land. Mulch only operations don't require a permit, but they do require that you follow best management practices and register. And animal feed, if food waste is used as animal feed, that is regulated by the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture and FDA. There is an exception if you feed animals unpackaged bakery, produce, and dairy products that are diverted from disposal. You have to get a general permit for that. So again, following best management practices that are developed by the department is how these operations are handled. The next tier is permit by rule. So in Pennsylvania, municipal and commercial leaf and yard waste composting operations under 5 acres have a permit by rule. And so do captive facilities. So if you generate waste on site and manage it on site, that's considered captive, and that's also permit by rule. But again, you need to follow best practices and you must register with the department. And then the general permit tier is for beneficial use and processing of a specific waste types or process technologies. So food waste is a good example of where a general permit would fit. And then individual permits, there's not too many of those out in Pennsylvania. A good example are biosolids processing sites. They require individual permits. A little bit wordy here, but this is just a summary of the 4 general permits that the main general permits that address food waste, composting, and digestion. There are other ones out there. Some include food waste and other types of processing. So these are the main ones that are used. So 3 of these are set to expire this year. The general permit 17 expires on the 20th of September. The 42, which is an anaerobic digestion permit, that expires the 18th of September, and 45, which is composting on quarry sites, that expires in November. So I believe the department requires a reapplication of these permits within 180 days of expiration date. So that should have been done already, according to that. It's actually written into the permit. I believe the department, either the central or regional offices, have sent out correspondence letting the permit holder know that this is, the permit's expiring this year and they need to reapply. So summarizing these permits, the 17 is your on-farm composting permits. Right now there's 15 permits enforced statewide. And as I said before, the 10-year permit term expires this year. And it's for sites that meet the definition of a normal farming operation. These are the feedstocks that are accepted in this type of operation. And the criteria has to be less than or equal to 5-acre permits. Permit area cannot exceed 500 tons or 1,000 cubic yards of food waste. and you can't have over 30,000 cubic yards of total materials on site. The next one, the GP25, is I call it a large scale composting permit. There are 9 permits and 4 statewide. These sites are to be less than 15 acres. If it's over 5 acres or the total volume is greater than 6,000 cubic yards on site, a closure bond is required. A lot more feedstocks allowed in this permit, hence the R designation in the WMGR 025 number or designation. That means residual waste. Some of these wastes here that are accepted are considered residual by DEP definition. So a lot more specific feedstock management is required for this permit. Quarterly sampling for metals and things like that are required. Leachate management systems have to be put in place, and an engineering compost pad is required. And then the 42 was mentioned earlier, the co-digestion of food waste, food scraps, and manure on a farm. And it also includes grease trap waste that can also be co-digested on the on-farm facility. Right now, there's 17 permits and 4 statewide. And again, that permit expires this September. The permit allows for the utilization of methane gas produced as a fuel to produce electricity. The waste solids or digestate can be used as animal bedding at the farm, and the liquid waste and solids removed from the digester can be used as a soil additive for ag purposes. And then the last one is the 45. That's the composting and quarry sites. That permit was developed by Ned Foley of 2 particular acres. He partnered with the Haynes and Kibble House Company, who has dozens of quarries across Pennsylvania. And he got 5 permits for 5 sites. Actually, only 2 are in operation right now. So it's just a little breakdown of where these sites are located, and I think the map that Bob and David showed, but showed some of these sites, actually the exact locations. But in summary, the Northwest and Southwest regions have the same numbers, believe it or not, of general permit 17 sites. They have 4 each. Each has 1 general permit 25 and 1 42 anaerobic digester. In the North Central region in Pennsylvania, that's the Williamsport area. You have 1 17, 4 general permit 25, and 3 anaerobic digester permits. In the East, 1 17 and 3 45s, which 2 of those are not active. So in essence, there's only 2 active sites that compost food waste in the Northeast region. In the Southeast, you have 4 general permit 17s, no 25s, 1 anaerobic digester permit with a total of 5. In the South Central region, which is the most active region, and that's due mainly, the Lancaster region is basically the breadbasket of Pennsylvania. A lot of food production, animal production, snack production. So a lot of food waste is available. So, alone I know there's 10 facilities, anaerobic digester facilities in Lancaster County. There's 11 total in the region. 1 17, 3 25s, and 2 45s. Proposed amendments to the general permit 42 are not proposed. It's actually a recent amendment that was done in 2020. So this is an aerial photograph of the Rhineford Farm. Again, that was mentioned in the previous presentation. It's located in Juniata County, pretty much the central part of Pennsylvania. They run a 800-head dairy operation. They built 2 digesters actually in 2012, one on this farm and one on an adjacent farm. And they actually got one of the first permits, the 42 permits in 2012. In 2017, they just installed a depackaging system. They actually built a dedicated 5,600 square foot building. If you look at this picture, it's the building to the far left. It's dedicated solely for food depackaging. So they had, after I think a visit from DEP, they had some concerns about contamination of some of the packaging or some of the bits of plastic getting into the process. So they limited the amount of material they could bring in until regulatory language was developed to address those concerns. So in April 21, DEP issued an amendment to the General Permit 42 that allows the packaging with these conditions. And so it basically says it shall be conducted that any shredding or fragmenting of packaging into small pieces, they just want to make sure that does not get into the process. That the packaging must occur within the fully enclosed facility, which it does, and no visible plastic fragments shall be in the digester effluent or in dewatered solids that is land applied or used as animal bedding. And then they have an actual sampling requirement on a quarterly basis for the material. So here's a quick tour of the Rhineford farm. Their manure and the packaged food waste get pumped into this slurry pit. I think it's mixed with water, and then it gets introduced into the digester on the right. It's a typical on-farm digester, usually a circular concrete tank with a cover to collect the gas. The gas gets sent to a generator where they make electricity, which gets put on the grid, and they actually utilize the waste heat to heat the digester itself and a lot of their farm buildings. There's another aerial showing the packaging facility. On the right and left, there is the inside of the facility, and thanks to Nora for these photos. These were in her article on the Rhineford farm and this operation. So it's a good reference, a really good article on how the process worked with getting this permit amendment. And that's the turbo separator that actually, takes in the packaged food waste and separates the food from the package. And that's the digestate that's dewatered and dried and used as their bedding. Here's an interesting one, something you don't see often. In 2020, I believe, the General Permit 17 was modified to allow for what for vermicomposting, which is worm composting, and Hermetia composting, which is a new term we came up with. Hermetia composting is use of the black soldier fly larva called Hermetia elutions. It's similar to vermicomposting. However, the manure generated is called frass versus castings, and the larvae themselves can be fed to animals like chickens, or it can be used for fish bait. So there's a market for growing this stuff for that use. And then the frass, again, is similar to vermicompost and can be blended in with compost or soils or used for soil amendment. The RMC has been involved in this project since 2016. After one of our organic summits, we were approached by the owner of Full Circle Bioconversion. Her name's Aubrey Formwell. She's from the Williamsport region, and we helped her, basically get her business off the ground. She had the business plan almost developed. She was really struggling with how to get this site permitted. So we worked with the regional and central office staffs at DEP, and we came up with the solution was to get an amendment for the 17 permit. So the RMC did draft some suggested language to incorporate into the permit, and in 2020 we got that through, and she's off and running with this operation, steadily growing, new customers. She collects the food waste on a route, and she sells to frass and larva sales. And that's just these are the actual conditions that were incorporated into the permit. I'm not going to read them, but you can read this later. But basically, the conditions, you got to provide a suitable environment to raise and maintain black soldier fly larvae, or in the case if you're doing worms, to keep them alive. You need that to do that, the processing, obviously. You have to, your quantities and loading rates have to be properly monitored to make sure you don't overfeed or create any nuisances, odors, leachate, wastewater, et cetera. And then there has to be a backup in case the population crashes. And that's why it's a good idea to have a backup composting site to accept the food waste in case something goes wrong with the population. There's some nice pictures. That's what they look like when in their young stage and adult stage. That picture in the middle, that's a fly hutch that they use to keep them indoors during the winter, and that's where they breed. And there's if there are any kids on the call, cover your eyes. That's the flies mating right there. I think they live only a few days. They emerge and then they mate and they die. They don't even have mouths, which is good from a vector standpoint of transmitting disease. Only the larva can eat. And there's a picture of the frass, similar to vermicompost. It goes through their systems much quicker than a worm, I believe, because there's always, you can actually see some of the residue of the food scraps. And actually, when that pile sits there to cure, it does generate a lot of heat. So it might be a good way if you blend that in with the compost, active compost. It can help boost the heat. And there on the right is some happy chickens eating some larvae. And the last one this is actually a proposed amendment to 17, and we're calling this a small scale / urban community composting amendment to the 17. So again, the RMC was involved in this project. Fairmount Park, which is the city of Philadelphia's park system, through their sustainability initiatives, they desire to establish a system of small community compost sites to receive organic waste from their park rec centers. I think they have 120 rec centers in the city. They have a number of concessions, restaurants, and park concessions, and of course from surrounding neighborhoods to involve the community into the composting. And so the selected site, which we call it the pilot site or the kickoff site, is a former streets department maintenance facility at Rising Sun Avenue, which is probably in the central part of the city. And it was chosen to be repurposed as the first site, as I said. It's a very small site. It's only 0.7 acres. It has a large building in the middle. And from 2019 to the present, Craig Coker from Coker Consulting helped with the permit application preparation, and the city staff, the GIS department helped. The water department helped with the stormwater aspects of the operation. And so again, there's a proposal with some model language to be incorporated into this permit that hopefully will get incorporated into the permit. I understand it's under technical review. I believe they're close to finishing their review up. So this site is the way the city has set it up is they did a request for proposals, a competitive bidding process, and Bennett Composting won the contract to operate the site. They are actually on site now, actually waiting for the actual permit to get started. So hopefully, if that permit's issued, this can be used statewide. I know Pittsburgh, the city is looking at a similar project, and it would be perfect for their operations out there. And there's a layout of the proposed composting process, basically going around the building with the tipping area, with their processing, curing, screening, and the mulch piles out front. Very close to the Tacony Creek. It does meet the setback requirements, but they have a very robust stormwater and leachate management plan proposed, it's a great site for composting. The slopes are really good. A lot of impervious area. It's just easy to get easy to get around with on this site, even though it's small. It's completely fenced in, so security is not an issue. So, and that's all I have. Anybody have any questions? If not, I think we're going to wrap it up. Again, we've recorded this. We're going to edit it and put it on our website. Thank you all the presenters for your great presentations, and thank you for your all the information that we're hoping to provide to everybody. And so I don't know if Bob's still on yet. If you want to say anything to close out. Maybe not.
No,
Okay.
Wayne, I'm still here. If you'd like me to make a remark, I do see though that, of course, at this hour, we're dropping some attendance, but I would also like to echo your thank you, particularly to our presenters who took the time out to put their remarks together and deliver those so well. But I do think, certainly Wayne is our team lead in organics, and those that we have assembled in terms of speakers, but also attendees. We need to look at this dialogue today, even though it's mostly a one-way street, given the virtual format, with some questions here and there. Need to look at this as a starting point and take a look at what's available here now as resources to, really advance what we're doing with organics in Pennsylvania and make a markets related difference, and hopefully use these documents as the tools that they're meant to be, with the, amendments and changes and improvements that have been recommended. So, I look forward to the group working on that together. And again, echo Wayne's comment to thank all of you for attending today.